Day is finally here. Thank you everyone who's here in person, everyone who is joining online. My name is Haider. I'm a cardiologist, I'm a researcher and a program manager here at ARPA-H in our Scalable Solutions office. This has been a long time coming. I've been learning and working on this concept and program idea for I believe since April of 2024 when I was at the FDA. And that really informed my sort of perspective on this. I really approached this from really two different perspectives. One was as a clinician, as a cardiologist who sees patients, and who is just, I was just in clinic just earlier this week, and we're really struggling. We're really struggling. Our patients are really struggling, and that was my motivation. There's so many gaps. There's so much more we can do, but we are limited in our abilities and in our ability to be present with all of those who actually need us. So before I begin, I think one of the other things I think that's really important is being able to share what in fact is ARPA-H. Some of you have worked with ARPA-H before, but many of you have not. Some of you have worked with other ARPAs, but perhaps not ARPA-H itself. Maybe you've worked with DARPA, ARPA-E, IARPA. We do things a little bit differently. And I would say there are two important things that we want to do today. One is we want to just tell you our story, tell you more about ARPA-H, what do we do, what does it mean, what are the processes like. But also, I think the second part is really to learn about who else wants to be on this journey with you all, right? Who else is in the room, who is excited, who wants to approach this problem? We're building the space shuttle. No one person knows how the whole space shuttle is built, but each one of you has an important perspective that is going to be needed to be able to pull this off. We have a great day prepared for you, snowstorm notwithstanding. We have amazing leaders from all of HHS coming. So that you guys know that this is not just ARPA-H kind of doing our thing. This is required so much coordination across the government because no one entity can do this, even if you are a federal agency. We will need all the help we can get, and I can tell you we are more well supported today than we could have ever imagined from operational divisions across HHS, and really aligned with the White House's AI action plan about making sure that can we get high capability AI in people's hands as quickly as possible, as well as possible, as safely as possible. And Advocate is really a manifestation of that vision. So we have a packed agenda. I would say that the first half of the day is really us sharing more about the program, how ARPA-H works. We have lots of time for Q&A. Lots of time to just get to know us, get to know our team members. Before I go any further, I do want to make sure that the team members that we have here who are part of the Advocate Strike Force, if they can just stand up and reveal themselves, or are they all just they're all working on fires? They're all working on fires. That's great. This is what we do. All right. So without any further ado, I'm gonna have so again, in the spirit of us doing things differently, ARPA-H has 4 different mission offices. Each of them has a different sort of thesis or portfolio. I am part of the Scalable Solutions office, and it is my distinct pleasure to invite Natalie Cates, who is the director of Scalable Solutions, to come join us and share and give you guys an introduction of the ARPA-H model. Thank you, Natalie.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Advocate Proposers Day. We are so excited to finally be here. As Haider mentioned, it has been a remarkable journey to get to this day, to just even get to the point where we can start talking to you all about the work that we're so excited to do together. Haider mentioned, I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction to the ARPA-H model. I'm not going to talk about the vision of ARPA-H, the future of ARPA-H. You'll hear from our brand new director, Alicia Jackson, later this afternoon. I'm going to talk a little bit about the model, a little bit about Scalable Solutions, and then I will quickly hand things back to Haider so that we can get to the meat of what you all want to talk about today, which is the program and how we're going to move forward with it. How many folks in the room have worked with an ARPA before, been a performer? Okay, a handful. So Welcome back to those of you who've worked with us before, and welcome to the family for the folks who have not. We are a very special type of organization and don't operate like a normal government agency. So if you're expecting that, I'm sorry, throw all the things that you know away, and we're going to do something a little bit different together. So our model, first and foremost, is very bottoms up. We look for amazing people like Haider who have amazing ideas and they want to change the world, and we hire them. And we have them pitch us the idea that they want to move forward with. We give them a big budget and tell them to go forth and have fun. I think fun is the right word there. Have fun. We focus specifically on breakthroughs. So our mission is to change the course of human health. DARPA has a really great line, which I've been trying to steal more, which is that iterative solutions will be considered non-conforming. We're not looking for what you can get done if you're an average AI company in the next 2 to 3 months. We're really looking to make a leap ahead for the industry and push everybody forward much faster than they would otherwise be able to go. In order to do that, you're going to be best friends with Haider and his team. We have a very hands-on, interactive, team-based model. One of the realities of taking on really hard challenges is that we know we're likely to fail in at least 1 or 2 places. Like ideas that we thought were good are not going to work out. We're going to start testing things with health systems, with patients, with doctors, and we're going to realize that we forgot something really important. We are expecting that. That is not failure. It is the path to success. We have to get through that. And Haider and his team are going to be working really closely with you all to make sure that we see the bumps that are coming, we understand how we're pivoting, and we can make sure that we can accomplish the goal that we have for the American people, which at its heart is to really make sure that every single American, regardless of where they are, has equal access to the best cardiology care. And for those of you who come from a product background like me, my background is all in new product development. You're probably already thinking ahead to, if we can do this for cardiology, maybe we can do this for other practices too, other specialties, and what would a world look like if I had my favorite doctor in my pocket at all times. I have spent my entire career, which is too long to mention, trying to make technology make healthcare better for the average person because it really sucks right now. And I have never been more excited about what a new technology can actually achieve in a space than I have been right now with AI. And for context for this group, I was not excited about blockchain. I'm not excited about all the new technologies, but this one I think actually can solve some real problems that we haven't been able to solve at scale before. So as I mentioned, 1, thank you for being here. Welcome to the family. 2, you're going to hear more today from Haider about the program and Shane, our amazing director of contracting for our office, about how to actually work with us. And if I go back to our mission, and particularly the mission of scalable solutions, right? Our goal is to reach everybody quickly. We're not looking for a cardiologist that only works, with Mayo Clinic. And if you understand how to use technology really well, we're really looking for solutions that can actually reach the entire country as quickly as possible. So thank you, and I will hand things back over to Haider.
Thank you so much, Natalie. So I think what's really exciting about today, both for the people who are in this room, the people who are online, is that you all come from so many different perspectives. You have so much. You bring so many different capabilities, experiences, backgrounds. But I think if I was to guess, what is the one thing that is common to all of us here and online, is that this realization that how we provide healthcare is just fundamentally broken. And the outcomes we achieve, the experience that we provide for patients is too poor, especially for how expensive it is. And nowhere is this worse than for patients with chronic disease, which I believe is not just the greatest public health, but also one of the biggest financial crises that this country and countries around the world face. And so while chronic disease is the major driver of morbidity and mortality, not just here, but now across the world, our health system is still designed to manage acute conditions, and it struggles to provide accessible, high quality, efficient care to everyone. And so we have, after putting in a lot of work, a bold vision to fight back. What if we had FDA-authorized clinical agentic AI that could provide safe and effective cardiovascular care to every American? And while you could start anywhere as the first high-impact use case for clinical agentic AI, in my mind, perhaps there's no disease more devastating and better suited for a clinical agentic solution than advanced heart disease, the single leading cause of preventable death, hospitalization, and healthcare costs in this country. And most of this is preventable. Unlike in conditions like Alzheimer's or ALS, where we're still waiting for the next big thing, life-saving interventions for heart disease are sitting on pharmacy shelves, waiting to reach the right patient. So simply being able to scale good medical care for patients with heart disease could in fact increase our nation's life expectancy. And if we can do it for a condition like heart failure, we can show that we can in fact do it for any other chronic condition. So we need a tool that can scale clinical knowledge into clinical action for entire populations. But the reality is that any solution that relies on a clinician like me is essentially dead on arrival. Research that my team led showed that 46% of counties in the United States do not have a single practicing cardiologist. But this poor care is not just restricted to just rural areas or geographically remote areas. We are providing poor care in our best hospitals in the country. We have this upcoming analysis from the American Heart Association's Get With the Guidelines registry, looking at people across the nation with heart failure. And the percentage of patients with heart failure who are admitted to the hospital, who are on the right therapies, life-saving therapies, is 2.5%. So that's what we are up against. And the focus of Advocate and the focus of our efforts is on the outpatient setting. Because while chronic disease is continuous and relentless, outpatient care is sporadic and reactive. That's where we lack most of the resources. Our hospitals are where we have diverted a lot of our resources, but it is really in the outpatient world where we're losing this battle to chronic disease. And even when you can access outpatient care, oftentimes the care that you receive is low value. It is associated with harm through both omission and commission, and it also costs a lot of money that doesn't lead to better outcomes. And lastly, the system is highly inefficient. We are wasting clinical resources with administrative tasks and have created this epidemic of clinical burnout. So at Clinical Agentic AI, which to me is AI that can provide clinical care directly to patients, all Americans could have 24/7 care to specialty care. We can unlock the full potential of the electronic health record and wearable data. In some ways, we all whine about the electronic health record. In my mind, EHR data is like we have discovered oil, but we don't have a car. Like we have this amazing resource that can truly transform human health, and to date, we haven't had a tool that can actually use it properly. And it is my belief that AI is in fact that tool that can help optimize this resource. And lastly, we can allow clinicians to practice at the top of their license. And that is really one of the reasons I am so excited about this. And the fact is that if we pull this off, this truly is too big to fail. The name of this program is not an accident. We want every patient to have an advocate at all times through sickness and health. The focus of this program is to transform care for patients at home, providing continuous care in between face-to-face visits with clinicians. The genesis of this program, at least for me, originated during the COVID-19 pandemic. I was leading the heart failure program at the VA in Boston, in West Roxbury. And this was a time when no one was coming to clinic. People didn't even want to come to the emergency room. Everyone was staying at home. So everything we were doing was just over the phone. Like we changed the entire paradigm of how we were providing care. But instead of waiting for patients, we were calling them proactively. And to our great surprise, our outcomes actually got better. So in essence, this technology should be able to do everything a clinician can over the phone. These are a broad array of functions that might require different teams to come together to propose a full stack solution. We're not looking for point solutions because they're not going to work. These capabilities need to span the entire spectrum of risk, starting with administrative and wellness functions. including functions like care navigation, being able to book an appointment or being able to estimate costs, for example. Lifestyle and diet and exercise are so important for patients with cardiovascular disease, making this an excellent use case as well. How good would it be that you have a nutritionist with you everywhere you go, whether you're at the grocery store, whether you're at In-N-Out. Not the best example. We also want this technology to be able to provide what we're calling advanced decision support, being able to provide at least differential diagnoses to patients, being able to perform high-risk functions like clinical triage. That is going to be one of the most important things that this technology does. Can this patient stay at home, or should they need to go to the hospital without reflexively sending everyone to the hospital and leading to an epidemic of overuse? And lastly, and this is, I think, where we truly want to differentiate, we are really focused on high-risk functions. We want this technology to be definitively, without any ambiguity, a high-risk medical device. And that means that it should be able to perform functions such as being able to change, renew, and refill existing medications, but also being able to order new in-scope medications for the patient autonomously. This technology will not replace clinicians, but represents a new member of the clinical team. A clinical team is not just a clinician. There's a medical assistant, there's a nutritionist, there's a dietitian, there's a nurse practitioner, there's a PA, there are residents. We've done this before. There's nothing unique about having or thinking about this technology as a force multiplier for clinicians like me who are struggling with their backs to the wall. Now, one of the things that I've heard as I've developed this program is that, well, you guys don't need to do this. This will just manifest itself. And that is yet to happen and is unlikely to happen unless the government decides that they're going to put their foot down and make a major investment in this space. Because there's so many blockers that are preventing this vision from becoming a reality. And this program has been designed to overcome each and every one of them. So let's start with the technical blockers. Agentic AI is not clinical grade today, and anyone who tells you otherwise is simply not being transparent. We know that LLMs work well when you provide them with pristine data, but will they be able to handle the messiness of clinical care? Many of my patients can't even recall they have heart failure to begin with. Are large language models ready to jump away from highly structured MCQs to the chaos of the electronic health record? So therefore, real-time clinical grade integration with both the electronic health records and variables is going to be paramount. There are also regulatory barriers. These clinical agentic AI technologies lack a regulatory pathway and precedent for market authorization, and that has held so many back from really going into this space. But the fact is that even if authorized, the truth is that today we have no real solution for post-market monitoring. It is my thesis that the pre-market space especially for generative AI, like how can you simulate all the different contexts and situations and prompts or settings that these technologies and how the patients might interact with them will find. So therefore, I really truly believe that post-market is really where we will get all the answers we need for this technology. And the fact is that, one of the phrases that we use to make people feel better is this idea of human in the loop. But human in the loop is just human on the hook. Clinicians will not put their licenses on the line for these technologies. It's just not going to happen. We simply cannot rely on human beings to solely oversee these technologies. And lastly, there are massive implementation barriers. Clinical agentic AI isn't just a new widget. A new drug can simply be swapped in place of the old one, but this is something totally different. Therefore, to both develop a scalable solution for advanced heart disease and to unlock the full potential of agentic AI, we are launching the Advocate Program. Our goal is ambitious and singular. We want to support teams that will develop a full-stack, patient-facing agentic AI solution that can autonomously perform tasks today that only a clinician like me can do. And most importantly, these technologies would be built with FDA authorization in mind. And ARPA-H is working closely with leaders and reviewers at the FDA to ensure that this vision becomes a reality, and you'll be hearing from some of them later today. We are building an enterprise and recruiting the very best of the best, bringing together startups, large tech companies, academics, health systems, clinicians, to join us and our partners across the US government. We have structured Advocate into 3 distinct technical areas, or TAs. Each TA is essentially an independent but interconnected funding stream that teams can apply for. So the usual pathway for novel technology starts with development, then evaluation, then regulatory submission and authorization, followed by deployment and scaling. Given how important this technology is, this program aims to do all of those steps all together. TA1, which we're calling the CVD agent or CVD agentic system. For TA1, we are seeking performer teams who will build out the patient-facing system that uses agentic AI to provide clinical care directly to the patient. What we present on this slide is just a proposal. It is a proposed workflow. We're looking for teams to max out their creativity and tell us how they would go about for this solution, bringing all their capabilities and ingenuity to bear. The intended use populations will be people living with heart failure and those who have survived heart attacks, a high-risk condition. This is a true clinician extender, a new autonomous member of the clinical team, and ideally, we're looking for teams who are already on this path, who have experience, who are seasoned, who have important data to differentiate themselves. Teams at ARPA-H can help to propel into the distant future. These solutions can be voice-based or multimodal apps. And these technologies need to be able to take actions, including autonomous modification of medications, clinical triage, providing diagnoses. All the things a clinician like myself would be able to do remotely. To achieve this degree of performance, these tools will have to be fully trained on and integrated into the electronic health record, and they must be integrated with at least one wearable or remote patient monitoring device, allowing them to become a closed loop of care. We don't tell teams what wearable or RPM to use, but we want these solutions to be modular, and we want to see creative uses of physiologic data for these patients. And our goal at ARPA-H is not to take IP or equity. It is to provide the resources, the connections, and the non-dilutive funding needed to bring both insurgents and incumbents together to chart this bold future. Before I go any further, I'm required to tell you, please read our ISO. Our ISO is this long document that has all the details that supersedes anything this guy says today. But I did want to share some of the required features and functions that we're really looking for TA1 here. What we're looking for is for teams to propose the development of a patient-facing agentic AI system that bidirectionally engages patients with heart failure or those who are post-MI or heart failure at home to provide clinical care. It ingests and processes patient data from the EHR and variables in real time. It is integrated within the patient's EHR and clinical practice. This should not exist outside of the patient's care team. This is part of the care team. It performs triage of patients, assigning tasks to clinical team members or referring to 911 or other measures as needed. And importantly, this is designed for FDA authorization. And this is really important. One thing we're really looking for in the solution summaries and the materials you provide us is for you to share what would your regulatory strategy be? What are you going to do to achieve FDA authorization for this novel indication? While we don't have a precedent for this, we want you to really think hard about this and use every resource you can get to develop this thoroughly. And lastly, this technology should be monitored or be capable of being monitored by, in real time, an independent supervisory agent in diverse clinical settings, including primary care only practices, multi-specialty practices, as well, and rural settings as well. TA2, which we're calling the supervisory agent. So constant vigilance is not required for every AI technology. But for the ones that push the envelope the most, real-time monitoring will be essential both for scaling and adoption. Human in the loop is just human to blame. It's just not going to work. And large language models are especially hard for humans to evaluate. Even when specifically looking for mistakes, research suggests that physicians miss more than half the hallucinations that AI generates. So the only scalable technology capable of evaluating generative AI is AI itself. Therefore, one of the most impactful aspects of Advocate is that we will also support teams who will propose the development of an independent, locally co-deployed supervisory agent, a disease-agnostic AI technology that both monitors any clinical agentic AI tool after it has been deployed and helps improve its performance through human feedback. A system that fully relies on continuous human oversight is not feasible and is almost certain to fail. And we want performers to pursue the FDA's medical device development tool pathway for these technologies so that this becomes the standard tool for post-market monitoring for all clinical agentic AI, and that future developers do not have to come up with their own solutions for post-market monitoring, and the regulators don't need all the answers in the pre-market phase for every successive agentic system. What we show here is just one proposed workflow, but I will emphasize, do not over-index on this. Bring your own expertise, your own creativities. You have the answer. This supervisory agent will function much like an attending physician overseeing the resident or intern. While this additional layer would not replace human oversight, it will be critical to optimize human oversight, helping us focus on high risk and high uncertainty actions. While we present a proposed workflow here, I want to emphasize this is not settled science, and we want to know how you in the community, both the researchers and the builders, would approach this problem and propose a scalable solution. Again, read our ISO in full, but some of the key things and features and functions that we're looking for in proposals for TA2 include that this needs to be a disease-agnostic, independently developed AI system, which means that this technology should not just focus on cardiovascular disease, it should focus across conditions. That can provide semi-autonomous monitoring and evaluation of clinical AI agents after clinical deployment. This technology should be able to assess appropriateness of both generative AI outputs and agentic actions, and determines if outputs can advance or be triaged to a human in the loop for verification. It should be able to assess inputs and outputs for relevant parameters, because the fact is that for this technology, we may not have ground truth. Right? A lot of live clinical situations, there's no sort of right or wrong answer. You will only have potentially surrogate measures, and these surrogate measures could include things like risk, things like acuity, things like uncertainty. This technology, like TA1, also needs to be fully integrated with the electronic health record, and it needs to be designed to be qualified as an FDA's medical device development tool, and teams should go ahead and read the FDA's MDDT guidance and materials and share their strategy and approach to potentially getting qualified via this pathway. I really think that that is an incredibly powerful tool that has so far been underused, but there have been previous post-market monitoring technologies that have been qualified through this pathway. And I will add that while we're open to both proprietary and open source proposals, particularly for TA2, we will prefer open source solutions. So the final mile is often the hardest in medicine. Implementing novel technologies in healthcare, especially those that change how we go about our business, is where so much promise comes to die. So clinicians and health systems must have a seat at the table from day one. Therefore, as part of our third technical area, we will recruit health systems, practices, maybe even payers, who will have a front row seat in shaping the development and deployment of these technologies in their patient populations. These health systems will support the co-design of both the cardiovascular agent and the supervisory agent through constant and continuous engagement. They will generate consensus around governance, provide access to EHR data and pre-production environments, and lastly, deploy the best performing technologies in clinical trial settings. We are especially interested in systems that represent diverse settings where we believe agentic AI will have the greatest impact, yet are often left out of clinical innovation. This will develop the scalable blueprint for how clinical agentic AI will become the standard of care in this country. Read the ISO. But In TA3, health systems and practices will be engaged in the development of TA1 and TA2 from day one. Performers will provide high-quality, longitudinal, time series EHR data for TA1 and TA2 development. An important criteria is really how supportive and seamless TA3 performer systems will make it for the CVD agent and supervisory agent performers to build their technology. TA3 performers will provide access to EHR pre-production environments to integrate solutions, although only in the second in phase 1B. They will provide access to clinicians and patients for UI UX and phase 1B independent verification validation. We'll talk more about that later. They will deploy only the highest performing TA1 and TA2 solution in randomized trials in their clinical setting. And therefore, they will develop a clinical blueprint for deploying both fully autonomous and semi-autonomous clinical AI agents in practice. TA3s will be very competitive as well because there's so many health systems that see this technology as part of their long-term strategic vision. So proposers should think about how they're going to differentiate themselves and how they're going to bring value to the American taxpayer. Let's move towards some of the programmatic considerations. So the fact is that we're asking a lot of the teams that apply to advocate. We refer to teams that apply to us and then get funded as performers. This is a great time to look at what you uniquely bring to the table and what are complementary teams that can help you develop a strong full stack solution. While one performer team can apply for any TA they like, each will require a distinct proposal. And one of the best things I could do today is actually convince many of you that this is not the right opportunity for you. You will hear more about our contracting process later from my colleague, but the first step is to put together a solution summary. The deadline for solution summaries is February 27th. We provide feedback. Are we interested or are we not interested? I strongly recommend that those solutions we deem not of interest to not apply further. We encourage strong teams and strong proposals to submit a full proposal, which we evaluate with other federal reviewers for source selection. We're looking to move fast, so you all need to hustle. Our process is unique. We do contracts, not grants, and are very metric and milestone based, and perform active program management. What this does allow us to do is to select multiple teams in each TA, each with different approaches and capabilities. And we expect to down select teams in TA1 and 2 until we have the highest performing team in TA1 and 2 left that will be deployed in randomized trials in their clinical settings. While we encourage collaboration, we understand that there might be competition within TAs, and we ensure IP protection. However, between TA1 and TA2 performers, it will be critical for data to be made available for stronger development of both technologies. We are pursuing an aggressive timeline. And not only is there serious competition to be among the teams selected, competition is baked into the program structure itself because I do think that that will bring out the best in all of us. Year one is the prototype development phase, and we expect TA1 and TA2 teams to have a prototype ready for evaluation around the end of year one to inform down selection decisions. The second year is a product development phase, and we expect TA1 and TA2 teams by the end of the year to have a product ready for evaluation to inform further down selection that will lead to then the randomized trials. Further, by the end of year two, TA1 should be ready for submission to FDA for market authorization, and TA2 should be ready to be submitted for MDDT qualification. This is when TA1 teams should be testing their technologies for the labeling claims that they wish to submit to FDA. Throughout the entire timeline, ARPA-H will facilitate strong and robust engagement with FDA to provide full regulatory clarity and line of sight. After year two, we will deploy the top performing TA1 CVD agent and TA2 supervisory agent to study both, not just the medical device, but also the post-market monitoring tool in clinical outcomes trials across all TA3 health systems. TA3 performers will be engaged from day one and will get to determine the rules of engagement and the standards to develop a common agentic orchestration layer. They will provide TA1 and 2 performers their EHR data, access to EHR pre-production environments, clinicians for UI UX, and will deploy the top performing TA1 and TA2 in individual randomized trials in their health systems. A critical partner for both ARPA-H and the performers will be our independent verification and validation partner that we are about to formally onboard. This has been a meticulous, months-long process given the novelty and criticality of this function, and it is an amazing resource not just for ARPA-H, but all of our performers. Our IV&V partner will be a major, highly accomplished lab with deep domain expertise that will do many major functions. First, they will curate EHR data from TA3 performers to be used by TA1 and TA2 performers. While most of this data will be used for model training and tuning, some data will be carved out to be used solely for independent evaluation. Second, they will perform the Phase 1A and Phase 1B studies that will inform down selection decisions. The Phase 1A study will be performed entirely with EHR data with synthetic patient profiles. The Phase 1B study will be performed with the product using real users, comparing the performance against actual cardiologists. What we're essentially doing is creating and developing the pre-market pathway for authorization for all clinical agentic AI. And all data collected through the process by the IV&V partner will be FDA grade and usable for submissions. Let's talk about the metrics that guide continued funding decisions. For TA1, we have metrics and milestones that span measuring safety, effectiveness, patient experience, EHR data integration, usability, and efficiency. As you can see, we are keeping the bar high, and it goes higher in Phase 1B. For safety and effectiveness, we're assessing both the quality of generative outputs and agentic actions. Clinical triage will be one of the most important aspects of this technology. With regards to safety, we are particularly focused on serious errors. Since this is a patient-facing product, patient experience will be important to measure and optimize for. One of the most important technical challenges for TA1 will be real-time clinical-grade integration with the EHR to inform its outputs. Therefore, appropriate selection, processing, summarization, and accuracy of EHR integration will be a major point of emphasis. Interoperability is at the heart of how Advocate has been designed. Our TA3 health systems will have multiple EHR systems, and we expect teams to be able to support an increasing number of EHR systems and wearable devices over the course of the program. And lastly, this will need to be a low latency and efficient system. While the outpatient setting does allow for more time, particularly when human intervention might be required, this will be an important consideration. TA2. Now, the challenge for the supervisory agent is that to date, a solution like this does not exist, nor is the science of agentic and generative AI fully settled. The lack of ground truth in live clinical situations is noteworthy. However, we believe that solutions can still be created that can both assess direct measures, such as accuracy or hallucination rate and quality of recommendations, but also surrogate measures that can direct the human evaluator to time-sensitive outputs. Such surrogate measures could include uncertainty, acuity, and risk. How well a supervisory agent determines the human engagement from the clinical team will also be assessed. Usability is important for the supervisory agent too, though the user here will be a member of the clinical team as opposed to the patient. The success of the supervisory agent will in no way be tied to the successful execution of the CVD agent. Note again that the supervisory agent will be disease agnostic, and so will its evaluation be. TA3. While we don't anticipate down selection, TA3 performer health systems will also have to meet specific metrics and milestones. In Phase 1A, health systems will have to ensure early and unfettered access to EHR and relevant RPM variable data that will be curated by the IV&V partner. This is also when the rules of engagement will be determined between all engaged entities. In Phase 1B, which is the second year, health systems will provide access to high-performing TA1 and TA2 performers to their pre-production EHR environments and lay the groundwork for successful initiation of the Phase 2 scalability study. In Phase 2, each TA3 performer will perform their own scalability study, comparing the co-deployed CVD and supervisory agent in their clinical practice environments, randomized versus usual care. More details about the scalability study can be found in our ISO. I want to end by pausing and reflecting on just exactly what ARPA-H is building to transform this space. Advocate represents the largest non-dilutive investment in clinical agentic AI ever. It is the largest investment ever in agentic AI evaluation the largest investment ever in agentic AI deployment. We are bringing health systems forward who are excited to actually provide the resources builders need to develop and deploy these technologies at scale in their practices. We have large tech companies that you'll hear from that are providing infrastructure and resources to our performer. Importantly, we're working closely with the regulators to provide the regulatory clarity and line of sight needed with a total product lifecycle approach. We have ASTP, who will be helping with EHR data and API access, which can be such a critical rate-limiting step for so many solution builders. Our Office of Commercialization specializes in helping support performers' go-to-market approach. Through developing and deploying this very specific and high-risk use case and our convening powers, with the selected teams, we will be setting the rules of engagement for how agentic AI will emerge as a new member of the clinical team, a new layer of clinical care. As you will see today, we have the full backing of the entire government. There's no two ways about this. I believe we'll look back at this day as a truly historic one. The amount of engagement we've had has been tremendous across the ecosystem, from academia, startups, health systems. So many have been waiting for this program because no one else but ARPA-H can do this. But this is also one of the most competitive grants you might ever apply to. We will not be able to fund the vast majority of those here and tuning in. Perhaps the most important thing you learned today is that Advocate is not the right fit for you. Even if you don't think you can carry a novel device through the FDA regulatory process, this might be for you. But I will say, even if you don't get selected, you will be a part of this coalition. So we want you to dig deep, give us your best ideas, be bold and ambitious, push the envelope of what is possible, form incredible teams, and I can assure you, we will do everything in our power to help bring this vision to life and help all the performers succeed beyond their wildest dreams. Thank you, everyone. And you'll be hearing from my colleague, Shane.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you. I am Shane Lomelin. I am an ARPA-H agreements officer, and I will be supporting the Advocate program. I'm going to go over just a few of the highlights of the ISO. We're going to look at this solicitation, and we're really going to focus on just the kind of really high-level things. So what that means is you need to read the ISO. You need to read it now. You need to read it as you prepare. You need it before you submit. Read it often, read it as much as you can. There's a lot of important information in there, and I can't cover it all here. So I really want to make sure, if you take nothing else away, that you are going to read the ISO. What you're seeing here is the solicitation number, which is not updated. So it should be 26142, so please don't use that number. But that is the solicitation number. If you've never heard of an ISO, it's an Innovative Solutions Opening. It is what we call our solicitation at ARPA-H. What makes it different than other solicitations is we're really only looking to award other transactions off of this. We are not going to be awarding grants or cooperative agreements or procurement contracts. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later, but that's why the different terminology. Before we dive in, if there's anything that you hear today from anybody that differs or contradicts what is in the ISO, please follow the ISO. The ISO is what matters. Again, you're going to hear me say this with almost every slide because it's so important. Please read the entire ISO and consider reading it more than once, just so you don't miss anything. If you submit something that doesn't conform to the requirements of the ISO, it's never going to make it to a reviewer, and we don't want that to happen to you. So please read it carefully. Advocate is a 39-month, two-phase program, with that first phase being split up between 1A and 1B. ARPA-H will determine who moves into those option phases based on technical progress and availability of funds. The program has 3 technical areas. They are listed here, and you just heard Haider talk about them so wonderfully. For those of you who want to participate in TA1 and TA2, you can do that. You do, however, have to submit 2 separate, technically independent submissions. You would have to do that at solution summary phase, and you'll also have to do that at proposal phase. So you can do it, you just have to do it separately. A PI can only be the lead PI on one submission. If you are submitting to TA3, you cannot submit to TA1 or TA2 at any stage. Now we're going to talk about other transactions. Hopefully this is helpful for those of you who aren't familiar with them. Again, these are not grants and cooperative agreements. They are not procurement contracts. You're going to hear these referred to as OTs. They are contractual instruments. They're not FAR-based, and they are not financial assistance arrangements. So the FAR is not applicable to these, and neither is 2 CFR 200. So if you're familiar in operating in those spaces, we're going to be outside of that for these awards. They are flexible arrangements that can be tailored, and they're more commercial-like than traditional government contracts. There's increased collaboration and partnership, and the negotiations tend to be more free-flowing and less restrictive than a typical procurement that you see in a FAR-based environment. Everything is up for negotiation. It's great. We have samples. If you go to the ARPA-H website and you go under Engage and Connect, there is a drop-down, and you will see something called the ARPA-H Other Transaction Community. We give you a lot of resources there, training, samples. There is a sample OT there as well that you can look at. It also has frequently asked questions. These are going to be very general frequently asked questions, and they don't apply to advocate, but they will give you information about OTs as a whole. I really recommend that you look at that page and look at all of those resources. They're going to tell you a lot about OTs. We've also included a sample OT for advocate in with the solicitation. So at the proposal stage, if you want to get a head start in the event that you are selected for negotiation of a potential award, you can redline that OT, and submit it back to us. Please don't do this at solution summary stage. Not necessary. Please don't do it. You are not required to do this. You don't have to do this. If you do choose to go ahead and submit your red lines back into us, we are not evaluating them, and it's not considered when a selection decision is made. It is simply there for us to have to kind of hit the ground running and start with that first stage of negotiations if you are selected for negotiation of a award. The selection process for advocate consists of a couple steps or stages. The first stage is going to be solution summary stages. It is mandatory. If you do not submit a solution summary, you cannot submit a full proposal. This is a shorter submission, and it's required. It allows us to give you feedback so that you can make informed decisions before you expend the time and the resources necessary to develop a full proposal. There are no evaluation criteria at this stage. It is simply reviewed. So at a minimum, you are going to hear back from our PM letting him know whether you are encouraged or discouraged from submitting a full proposal. So if there is interest in your idea, again, it's very limited. It's a small submission, but if there's interest based on what he sees there, that's what you're going to hear. If, however, what he sees there either is not interest on the part of ARPA-H or it doesn't fit our mission, then he's going to discourage you from submitting. Regardless of the feedback you get at the solution summary stage, you can still submit a full proposal. You're not precluded from doing so. You can do it. But I really want to caution you against doing that, because if he has taken the time to tell you that that concept, that idea is really not of interest to us or the ARPA-H mission, he means it. If there's some wiggle room in there, he's going to encourage you. If you're discouraged, he really means it. And again, we don't want you to take the time and the resources necessary to submit something that has a really low likelihood of succeeding. Again, I'm going to recommend you read the ISO multiple times as you're putting your proposal together. It is a long document. It has a lot of information, but everything is in there for a reason. At the full proposal stage, you're going to notice that there are attachments. They provide format and content information, so please make sure you review those carefully. Again, if you are found non-conforming in one of the requirements of the ISO, your submission is never going to make it to anybody for review. We don't want that to happen, so please be really, really mindful about reading it. At this stage, there are evaluation criteria. Those are detailed in the ISO. They are specific to the advocate program, so please make sure you read them carefully. If you're familiar with criteria from other solicitations, Doesn't matter, read these. Even if they're named similarly, they're gonna have different aspects to them. Please read them. Once we have all timely conforming proposals, once those have been received, the evaluation and selection process proceeds. Provided that you submitted a timely conforming proposal, you will get a notification as to whether or not your proposal was selected for negotiation of a potential award. We're going to continue on with a little bit about this review process. This is just a high-level overview. So again, please read the ISO. Advocate submissions, again, are limited to separate submissions for TA1 and TA2. So again, you can propose to both. You cannot do it all in one proposal. You have to do it in separate, technically independent submissions, so that your submission for TA1 cannot depend on your submission from TA2. This also, again, means you need to have submitted solution summaries for both TA1 and TA2. Proposals have to stand on their own. So when you submit a proposal, please make sure that you are not assuming that something you put in your solution summary carries over. Once the solution summary is looked at and we've encouraged you to submit a full proposal and you do so, we're not thinking about your solution summary anymore. Evaluators can only look at what's in front of them in your proposal. So if you put it in a solution summary but then left it out of the full proposal, it can't be considered. You will get a notification letter letting you know if you've been selected for negotiation of a potential award. That's going to be sent by email to the POC that you list in your full proposal. These are highlights of the evaluation criteria. These are only highlights. The full evaluation criteria are in the ISO. Please read the ISO. They are listed here on the next two slides in descending order of importance. So the things that we really value, we value it all, but the things we really value up top, then in descending order of importance. Again, there are a lot of aspects to each of these criteria. These are the highlights of them. So please, when you read the ISO, you'll get the full picture of everything that we're looking for. And you want to do that because you want to give the evaluators what they need in order to evaluate your submission. If these titles look familiar, if you've seen them in other ISOs, and you 100% have seen them in other ISOs, that doesn't mean they are exactly the same. So they are tailored specifically for this program. So they may have the same title, and they may even have some of the same kind of buzzwords to them. It does not mean they are exactly the same. Please don't assume they are, and please make sure that you read that ISO so you have that clear understanding of what evaluators are looking for. These are the second two criteria. Again, only highlights, full details are in the ISO. This is really the most important thing you're gonna look at. This is how your submission is gonna be judged. Please don't take this lightly. I wanna talk a little bit about teaming. For advocate, you can choose either a traditional prime-sub relationship, which most people are used to, or you can do multi-party teaming arrangements. No matter what teaming structure you decide to go with, there has to be an organization that's named as the lead for the purposes of submitting and handling all the administrative duties for the team. For multi-party teaming submissions, where ARPA-H will award to the team as a whole and not just to one entity, a teaming arrangement has to be executed by the team prior to award. ARPA-H is not a party to that agreement. We just want to make sure that you guys have come to an agreement and you've executed it before we give you an award. If you want to learn more about multi-party teaming arrangements, please refer back to the ISO. There's a whole lot of content in there. It's really detailed, but really important. So please refer back to the ISO for all the details you need on that. Another important component of this is resource sharing. And we're really encouraging offers to consider this as part of your cost proposal. A resource share is any portion of a project that is not paid for by federal funds or contributions under the OT or an existing contract or other assistance arrangement. There are two types of resource sharing. Those are cash contributions and in-kind contributions. Cash contributions are exactly what they sound like. They're direct monetary payments made by the performer or a third party to directly support your solution. In-kind contributions are non-monetary contributions that are provided by a performer or a third party that directly support the proposed solutions. So for some examples, cash contributions are you pay the direct labor, materials, equipment, software costs. In-kind can be goods or services or resources that have a market value to be used in performance of the work under the OT. So not just things that have value, but things that have value and you're actually going to use under the project. Examples of this might be uncompensated personnel time, effort contributed by project staff, use of existing lab equipment. So you guys have the lab equipment. Instead of trying to charge the government for it, you're going to kick it in as cost share. Access to proprietary databases, data sets, or research libraries. The resources that you kick in for in-kind contributions don't have to come from the prime. They can come from any of the team members or a third party. Even though we're encouraging you to do this, we really need to make sure that it makes good business sense. And what works for each of your submissions is going to differ. It's going to differ based on things such as like what are we looking at for commercialization and your commitment to pursuing things into commercialization. It's also important to know, and I really want you to hear this part too, when you propose resource sharing, it's collaborative, it's teamwork, it's everybody kicking in. That means you're not proposing profit or fee. So if you are proposing this arrangement, please make sure your cost proposal does not include profit or fee. This is just a high level discussion of resource sharing. We have a lot more examples and details in the ISO, so please look at that. In the ISO, you're also going to find a list of things that are unacceptable as cost share. So I really suggest that you look at that. It's going to give you some really good kind of guardrails for which to operate as you think about what you want to do for cost share. Okay. Some final thoughts. As you read the ISO several times, please make sure you understand what's being asked of you as proposers. And also try to look at it and make sure you understand what the reviewer is going to be looking at. Again, if your submission doesn't conform to the requirements, it may never make it to an evaluator. Again, we don't want that to happen. We want your good work to get out there. We don't want something as, we just missed something in the ISO to hold you back from doing that. This is not necessarily the PM's decision. If it's non-conforming, he never sees it. So really, please read it. If, however, after reading the ISO, I want you to take a look at the FAQs that are going to be on the Advocate webpage. Also, I'd like you to look at those FAQs that are on the ARPA-H other transaction community. Look at those as well. See if your question's been asked and answered already. It may already be there. If your question has not been answered, submit one. We have a portal. I'm going to show you that in a second. Submit it there. We're going to post the questions there. We're going to post the responses there. We're going to update those periodically. There may be times where the question you submit to us is really specific, or it might include some information that maybe you don't want the whole world to know. Please don't submit questions with proprietary information. But if we read it and we think this just might be a little bit too specific, or it really is just for you, we may rephrase that question and kind of combine it. So if we get the same question 3 times, worded differently, but the same question, you're just going to see it on there once. We'll combine them. So you may submit a question. What you see on our FAQs may look different. That's because we went ahead and just edited a little bit just to kind of protect everybody involved and make sure that we don't put something out there that we don't want to. You may also get a direct response from us as well. If it's really, really specific and we don't think it's something that might be a common question or the general public needs to know, we'll respond to you directly. You'll want to register for the ARPA-H submission portal. That's where you're going to submit your questions, your solution summaries, and your proposals. Also, as a reminder, please make sure you have a current SAM registration. That can take some time to get, and we have no control or influence over how fast those get processed or approved. So really need you to make sure you have one of those. That's something you can kind of take care of early and get done with. Okay, this is where you are going to find the FAQs posted. Check it a lot, check it often. We're going to update it all the time. Our goal is always to kind of have those there available and updated in a timely manner so you can actually apply those answers to your submission. And finally, monitor sam.gov, monitor the advocate website. If we need to make changes to the ISO, we're going to post them there. The amendments are going to show up there. So keep checking that as well. We do sometimes have to make some changes, sometimes as the result of questions that we get from you guys, where we say maybe something wasn't so clear and we can make that clearer. We'll amend the ISO so that everybody has that information. So please make sure to monitor that. That's where we will post them. We will post them to SAM and to the advocate website. Okay, that's it for me, guys. And I'll read the ISO.
Folks can ask questions of Shane now, or we can go into break and we can do consolidated Q&A after.
Yes.
How much is the time between the summary being submitted and the results being announced to the server? You only have 30 days to submit the full proposal.
Yeah, I don't have a complete timeline for you as how that. I know that Haider is going to work as fast as humanly possible to get those reviewed and get that feedback back to you. I don't have an exact timeline for you, but I know this is your guy and he's going to do everything he can to get that done quickly. Yes, sir.
Sorry, because for the virtual people, please.
Oh, apologies. I'm so sorry.
Testing. Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Bilal Naved. I'm with Mount Sinai. And as part of the feedback provided in the solution summaries, might there be any feedback on the teaming itself? Perhaps there's teams that when you read the solution summaries, you might say, oh, actually, you two should perhaps work together. Is that within scope at all in this sort of feedback?
ARPA-H will never direct teaming. And I will kind of defer to Haider on what he thinks as to how much feedback he's going to give at that stage. At solution summaries, you are at a minimum going to hear if you are encouraged or discouraged. I'm not sure if you put much thought into how much additional detail you want to put in other than that.
I mean, the fact is that, if you're interested in a solution summary, then our goal is to make sure that you have a really successful full proposal, right? So, and if it's perfect, then we just say we're interested. But I think, because my goal is that if you've sort of made that cut, then we want to be as highly likely that we're going to move forward. Maybe I can't sort of share feedback about which team to work with, but we can say that, well, this is a space that is missing here. This is a piece that's missing here. Maybe that's like someone who's like really good at EHR integration or having a great variable partner. Whatever that might be. Like we can tell you that find this guy or girl, but it may be more focused on the sort of technical gap. Maybe there's a regulatory gap or something like that. So we can certainly share feedback that is technical in nature rather than directed at a specific entity.
Hi, Sharif Fakili, UpDoc. A question, is teaming preferred or not necessarily? And is there a preference between dating between team members or marriages between team members?
I will say there's not a preference given to one over the other. There are advantages and disadvantages to each. In a prime sub relationship, right, there's one guy, he's on the hook for everybody. We're just dealing with that, which can be an advantage or a disadvantage. In a multi-party teaming arrangement, you have the ability to swap out the leader based on what phase you're in or what you're working on. It gives the government privity of contract with the team. In a prime sub relationship, if you come to me and say, hey, I'm working with one of your primes and they're doing this, and that, I'm going to say, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I have to talk to the prime. And a teaming arrangement eliminates that because the lead of that team is administrative.
It's a great question, and I've been anticipating this, so I've been working on my metaphors. And the metaphor I'll use here is that even though I am from South Asia, I don't want arranged marriages, right? I want love marriages. But I think that what I will say is that, but then someone like corrected me, but but maybe you can be like, you can recommend people, or you can like tell them, what do you think about that? So I think we have a great teaming page where a lot of people are sharing information about what they're interested in, what they're bringing to the table. I will say that, I think just categorically, you do not need to team, right? If you think that you can go it alone and you have everything in-house, fantastic. But that is a determination that I cannot make on your behalf. I do think that just thinking around what are the different pieces, especially I think for TA1, where we are looking for a lot of different functions. But that is a we can certainly guide on the sort of maybe at the solution summary phase, or maybe even earlier if you have a feedback call. But I think we will not be forcing this on anyone.
Haider. So actually, there's a research showing that if you choose your partner freely, that works better than arranged marriage. So research on that. So for your idea. My name is Gordon Gao from Johns Hopkins. So my question is about the TA3. So right, I saw your slide that we need to make the data available to TA1 teams, right? So within 1 month. So would you expect that there will be conversation between TA1 team and the TA3 team to ensure that this is feasible?
So I think timely availability of EHR data is like really, I think, one of the key functions that TA3 will have to perform, but also ensure us. Like what I will say is that one of the other entities that is really going to be another very useful resource for TA3 health systems is our IV&V partner. So I want to talk a little bit about IV&V because I feel like I didn't know what this was until I joined ARPA-H. So basically IV&V is independent verification validation. We put a large chunk of resources that we give to an entity. Sometimes that's a federally funded research lab or another sort of similar type of organization that we have an agreement with. Shane can sort of fill in the gaps where I miss it. And there are 2 goals that they have. One is that they're really there to support both the program managed PM team, but also the performers. And here they're one of the, we did a lot of work on this. One of the key resources that our IV&V partner will provide is that they will actually perform the data curation for the TA3 health systems. So they won't have to sort of individually have to do that. So that is a specific service, and we can go into more details. We'll have everyone on board. So by the time everyone is contracted, we can really sort of talk very specifically about what specifically will the IV&V partner do, and that so really TA3 teams will work with the IV&V partner, who will then make this data available to all the performers. And I think that's to TA1. That is one of the things we look for in the TA3 proposal. Is like, again, the role that I see TA3 performers is how easy are you going to make it for the technologies to be built, right? How seamless? Tell us. How can you guarantee that the builders that we are bringing in to build out the TA1 and TA2 technology, you're going to make their lives super duper easy, and that will be part of the evaluation process.
I could add one more thing too. What you're going to notice if you look at that model OT that we provided with the ISO is you're going to notice an article in there called Associate Contractor Agreement. And that is what is going to kind of talk about all of this data sharing that's going to be done among the teams. Once the program starts, there'll be a kickoff. So you guys are going to be meeting all of each other. Those of you that end up with awards, you'll be meeting each other. And we're going to have that, what we call the ACA in place. So that's going to kind of put the structure around what that data sharing will be.
Thanks. Karandeep Singh, UCSD. Quick question around TA3 and health systems. I know there was something in the ISO around, like there may be a need to partner with an agentic AI platform to be able to make sure that we can deliver on it infrastructurally to implement generative AI or agentic AI solution. The question I had was, is there any expectation or preference from an ARPA standpoint around different disparate health systems partnering, or is it really like the partnering should make sense on administrative grounds or some other grounds?
So TA3 is a really interesting sort of TA. It's actually fairly unique for ARPA-H. If you look at the history of ARPA, we're like modeled after DARPA. We're just like DARPA wannabes, which is a great, if you're going to be a wannabe, be a DARPA wannabe. But one of the things, but implementation was never sort of a big DARPA sort of need because they have one customer, right? And so this is a unique new sort of model. And really, from my perspective, the question for the TA3 performer is, what is the value you're bringing to ARPA-H? What is the value you're bringing to TA1 and 2 performers? And we provided our evaluation criteria of what are we actually looking for. So for example, like one of the things that we make clear is that what we want is that we want this technology to be tested in diverse settings, right? Diverse by business model, right? Diverse by geography, diverse by how they do business. So if you can bring, if there's a coalition approach in which we can see that, we're getting more for less, for example, right? We're getting a lot more value for the American taxpayer who is funding Advocate, thank you. Then if that can build the case, that's fine. But again, I think that is for the teams to decide. There is a risk to collaboration. If they can sort of show, I mean, again, I don't want to fill in the blanks, but I think that is going to be, put yourself in sort of my head of what am I going to look for? What is the case that you have to make that this is actually the best way to be able to do or accomplish the goals of TA3? Whether that could certainly be a consortium, that could certainly be a coalition, that could also be like a I think there are many different ways that you can sort of reach that goal, but it's a good question.
Sanjeev, Wadhwa Life Singularity. I came from a background in professional services where I was part of several national efforts with Observational Medical Outcomes Partnership and FDA Sentinel. I mean, one of the challenges I see with this is, CVD is not uniform throughout our nation. So it's not just one TA3 can fulfill, like Kaiser can't be in every location. So the populations and social determinants are pretty diverse. Do you anticipate like some of this will come through the TA3 collaboration initially and the data will be sort of pan-geography, or are we partnering in a single geography? And second part of that was like, how do you anticipate this partnership proceeding? Because I'm assuming there's over 100 entities here and everybody collaborating with everybody else isn't possible. So is there a process that you're advocating in terms of how partnerships should proceed?
Let me talk a little bit about TA3. So what we are doing, so you're totally right? I mean, for example, and this is what we're trying to, my goal is for TA3 to be a sort of vehicle to really massively scale these technologies like right out of the bat. So instead of like a builder sort of having to sort of figure out all these like different agreements, you have everything locked in place. So as soon as you're ready, you can just go. And we're looking for multiple TA3 performers. Right? So we're not just saying that, we're going to pick one health system or second health system. We are looking at supporting multiple TA3 performers, and that will be part of the consideration. Right? A part of the consideration is that can we get a large enough geographic footprint that can give us something generalizable, right? So that because one of the things that what we want is that when we get these studies done, when we get this performed, everyone can feel like, this can work for me. Right? If you just restrict yourself to a sort of very specific type of practice setting that very few other people can replicate because of whatever resources they have, et cetera, are other health systems going to have confidence that, is this going to be, can I actually do this? Right? Do I have the resources to pull this off? So I think part of the, and that is, again, that goes to what the TA3 health systems and their sort of proposals have to basically convince us is that if we get selected, what comes out of this is instantly generalizable, not just from a sort of disease perspective. That yes, we have large enough footprint of patients with heart failure. Right? These are patients who are representative. This is our patient demographic. These are the sort of different settings that we have patients in. This is how we will enroll patients. I think that is the case to be made. But the goal is that. And it's everything is in the ISO, but I think that is a vision that we have, is that we don't just want this technology to work, because if we wanted it to really work in one specific setting, we would just go there. We want it to work in a way that everyone has confidence that it can work for them as well. And each TA3 performer will do their own study. So it's not like every TA3 performer, all the TA3 performers will have to do one scalability study across, because I feel like, that adds another layer of complication. So every TA3 health system or health system sort of consortium, they will propose their own study, and it will not overlap with the others. So, and again, that gives us multiple shots on goal to see, where is this, because this technology may work differently in a, risk-based or primary care practice, for example, versus a large multi-specialty practice. And being able and combining those studies actually, I think, dilutes what you learn. So I think that is how we are approaching this problem. And the idea is, and I think that's where the TA3 performers will have to make that case that they can achieve those goals. So
I can take a little bit of that one. So as far as how to find your partners, you're going to have some opportunities today here. It's one of the benefits of being here. You're going to have lightning talks where you're going to get to hear about each other's capabilities. And we also have a teaming page where you can put your profiles there, and you can also peruse the profiles of others to kind of help you with your matchmaking. So we can facilitate it. We cannot direct it.
Hey, Rahul Dev, I'm on health in Brigham and Women's Hospital. So our company has a software arm and a clinical arm. The clinical arm manages a lot of rural area cardiovascular patients. There is no EHR that has the information that they want in most of these cases. It's very fragmented. So much of the early work is just around how do you actually gather these sort of disparate pieces of data into one place to operate on. So just my question are we assuming happy path? Is this Brigham and Women's where all the data is in one record and the agent is just working on a nicely kind of assembled group of data with many device data coming in that separately? Or are we actually sort of saying this is probably what reality is, which is that part of the agent's job is to hunt down these pieces of data and actually act on them? And related to that is a little bit around, are we imagining there's a provider who is connected to the agent, who is the sort of the single source that has all of this, and then this is an extension of a single provider, or is this supposed to be something that's somewhat freestanding that doesn't need a kind of a single responsible party to be owning what the pop-offs are and all that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think part of the TA1, so there's several questions in there. So you just like fired away, which is great. All right, let's start with the data piece. And I think one thing I've learned, I mean, I've been doing a lot of engagement in this space, and I've been talking this whole question of, and there's this big question of like the areas of where these technologies are going to have the most impact are rural areas. I think that's very clear. Like the half the counties in the country that don't have a single cardiologist. But then also, are we setting up these technologies and those health systems to fail, right? If we put these technologies into places that don't have the infrastructure, don't have the data, just don't have the capabilities to be able to do this. And so I've been what I will say is that what I have learned, so there's this tension, right? Do you like force it into settings where you think you're going to have the most benefit, but are you setting them up to fail? So one thing I've learned is that not all rural places are the same. Right, this is kind of I've learned, and this was my sort of prior that I came in, and I think that has been challenged. So I do think that there are teams that are working in those spaces that are in fact innovative, that do have good data. It may not be the best data, but it is better than what I would have sort of imagined. That's also why you take multiple shots on goal. Right? That's why you don't over-index into okay, we're just gonna go Montana, boom, right? We're part of the approach here is that is why we have multiple places. And that's also one of the reasons why, even though we don't have down selects baked into TA3, there is an expectation that these are certain deliverables they have to provide. And if they don't, then we can cut them. TA3 I think is one of the most exciting pieces, because I think from a health system perspective, what we've seen is that health systems are getting bombarded with solutions, right? And they don't know how to trust them or vet them. They want an entity like ARPA-H, which they can trust, and they can say, oh, these folks have vetted these technologies, and so now we're more comfortable working with a partner like ARPA-H as an intermediary, so that we will actually take this swing and actually commit to deploying these technologies in their practices. But they will still have to meet specific criteria to be able to continue. And part of that is going to be how well are they actually doing what they're supposed to do, which is supporting the development of TA1 and TA2. With regards to the other so I think TA1 is not just a technology solution, it is a clinical practice problem-solving solution. The problem is you have patients with heart failure who are at home, who don't have their medications treatment optimized, who don't know who to call when they have symptoms. They're having heart failure exacerbations, or is it COPD exacerbation, right? I mean, and they can't call someone. And so yes, you have to build a technology that can help them through that process and can close that loop, but also you have to actually provide like, how is this going to integrate with the clinical solution? Like, how is it actually going to be part of the clinical team? Like, are you going to have, and there are different sort of models to do that, right? I mean, again, I think that I think many teams might come up with different ways to do that. Is there an on-call cardiologist, for example, right? That is sort of your advocate, whatever, I don't know. That is sort of overseeing, so instead of getting the calls from the resident or intern, they're the ones who may be potentially managing like whatever sort of outputs are sort of sent up. Is there a virtual practice, is a virtual cardiology practice that is sort of your back end, that is basically sort of monitoring all these sort of outputs that are coming in and sort of triaging them as needed. I think that's one of the beauties of this whole process. I'll save you all because I'm just going to tell you this individually. Like I've been thinking, what are the different ways to explain this? So it's like a program is as a way of me saying, I love chicken biryani. Make me the best chicken biryani in the world. But I'm not a chef, right? And so you guys are all the chefs, right? There's a level of specificity that we provide because otherwise you can't actually run a program. But part of what I'm trying to do, part of the process, and I think the magic is that you guys are the brains, right? You guys are like deep in this stuff, like, we want like individual like approaches to like, okay, how are you going to what is your sort of vision of how you're going to fulfill that vision? And so to get back to TA1, I think that is part of that. It has to be part of the proposal is not just that, oh, this is how we're going to build this technology, this is how we're going to train it, this is how we're going to validate it, this is our regulatory strategy, but also this is how we're going to make this viable as a clinical solution.
Hi, I'm Matt Bishop, Technical CEO of Open City Labs. So in the proposal, there's a lot of use of the singular agent, right, and agents, right? I'm assuming that for any one of the technical areas that there'd be multiple teams that might be adjusting one area with multiple agents. Okay, that's what I thought. And
there's a shorthand.
The other part of this question is, obviously, if you were trying to scale impact, you also need to be able to scale trust. And amongst the risks that come with agentic AI is an exponential increase in cybersecurity risks, because your risks is increasing as you have more and more agents like connected to one another. And so how are you thinking about that scaling trust? And then how are you thinking, once you have some winners at the end, how are you thinking about aligning different company and organization incentives, that will go beyond, the ARPA-H program to kind of facilitate adoption, like after the funding's done?
So let's talk. So again, let's start with trust. I've shared this story before, but I'll share it again because it's great. I'm a cardiologist. I've been moonlighting now. I've started clinic at Boston Medical Center. But over the Christmas holidays, between Christmas and New Year's, I was in the hospital in the Cape. And there's a woman who came to the hospital in the emergency room, and she had like vague symptoms, like not the sort of symptoms that I would think that would make you leave like Christmas dinner and come to the hospital. Like her hands were getting red, she was feeling a bit dizzy. We checked her labs, and she was having like a massive heart attack. She was having what we call like a silent heart attack, which I was like surprised. Like that's like I asked her like that's pretty cool that you came to the hospital. Like I feel like so many other patients would have just stayed at home. And she said, yeah, I wrote my symptoms down in ChatGPT and it told me to go to the emergency room. Right? She is one of 40 million people who use only ChatGPT alone every single day for health-related issues. So I think that so I completely agree that these technologies need to be trusted, right? especially if they're going to own the outcomes. But I think this is one of the interesting things about the generative AI space is that the conversation around trust is moving, but also that's why we want a regulated pathway for these technologies, right? So that is why we want, if you're going to own right now they don't own the outcomes, right? Right now there's a disclaimer that this is not for medical use, but that is why we're opening this regulatory pathway for these technologies so that you can in fact gain that trust that comes with being a sort of officially authorized technology that has a specific ended use with a claim that you can make and get paid for. Cybersecurity is something that we have been thinking about a lot, right? Because the surface area for these technologies for vulnerability is like massive, right? I don't want all my patients to be prescribed amiodarone in an instant. So here's how we've thought about this. So first of all, if you should read our ISO because we actually write about this. Yeah. So here's how we've thought about it. I think it is a really important issue. I think this one thing that we've been talking a lot with FDA, and FDA already has specific sort of guidelines that speak to cybersecurity requirements for software as a medical device and other types of medical devices. And so as part of the sort of evaluation, and we, again, this is in the ISO, like teams have to sort of meet those requirements. We are not going to do quantitative penetration testing as part of IV&V. So we will not be performing any sort of specific tests, but we will be doing qualitative checks to make sure that have teams like done everything they need to do to be able to meet those specific requirements that they would need to do anyways, because if they're going to go to the FDA. Having said that, I think that this is another reason why I think that this is going to be really important, is because these are questions that I don't think a lot of people have been thinking about, in my mind, right? You have, right? And there are serious people who are thinking about this, but I think that it's been one of the things that I feel like we really need to push the envelope on and really build more standards around, especially for this type of technology, given its specific risks.
Okay. Hey, thank you. Thanks for having us all today. This is Jacob Agris. I'm the physician and VP for product at Construct AI, and then we have a sister company, Rhythm X. Two questions for you, if you don't mind. One, a follow-up from a lot of these on how do you unify the extraction of data, particularly in rural settings. It seems that there are some tools out there that probably could be better that help to do that kind of deep data extraction. Is there thought whether that belongs in category 1, or whether that belongs in category 3? Like, where is the technology to extract the data going to fit? Is the first question.
So one of the things that I think that this is a part of what is happening. So this is, I would say, more of a TA3 function than a TA1 function, right? It should not be. It should be, because this is, especially if there's specific things for specific health systems that are different. Like, again, you don't want. My goal is to unburden the TA1 and unburden the TA2 developer so that they don't have to worry about these things. That is what the TA3 teams have to make the case. And I would say that I think being able to, and how teams make that case is going to be different. And it may be that we have done this before, or that we have some partner. I think, but that will not, I do not anticipate. I think it's a good question, and we should probably think about that and maybe put that on one of the FAQs. But that really feels more of a TA3 has to make that case, because again, that's what the TA3 is there for. Right? They're there to sort of make the case, and because they're not building a technology, they are providing in my mind, a critical service. But as part of that service, they get to have a seat on the table and really sort of help determine. I think one of the cool things that TA3 gets to do is actually determine what can this technology actually do. Like if your heart failure, if a genetic system, can it change your metformin? Right? I mean, it's a diabetes drug. They're kind of interrelated. You can argue, but in my case, I would say our focus is really on in scope. So if your indication is heart failure, then that should be what you should be able to modify. But those are decisions that the TA3 health systems can actually contribute to, which I think it's unique and really sort of is a unique opportunity.
It'd be great to get a unified platform, though, from how do you get the data out, is what's driving the question.
And that's where also I think the IV&V partner is going to be really important, right? And that's one of the reasons we went with the specific IV&V partner, because I think that instead of having every TA3 partner like come up with like their own system of providing data, like you have a unified pool that can then be used for, and again, the focus there is mostly on actually using the data for training and instead of like the clinical deployment piece. But that is, again, part of what we're going to look for in the TA3 systems is that, can you ensure us that this technology is going to work and your system is going to be able to handle this technology?
Anthony Hoogs from Getware. I'm the Vice President of AI. Getware does a lot of research in AI and also in healthcare. So we're interested in TA1 and TA2. My question is about the relationship between those two TAs and the evaluation. So the first year evaluation, for example, for TA2, it does not show any integration with TA1, which makes sense because the TA1s are being developed. So there's a question there of how TA2 is going to be evaluated without a coupling to a TA1. And one answer to that from the teaming perspective is for a TA2 prime, for example, to be a sub on a TA1 effort or vice versa, and some relationship where the same organization basically is on TA1 and TA2 in some role. The ISO explicitly allows that in a contractual sense. I'm wondering how much you want that and what you envision that relationship is if there is the same entity on the TA1 and TA2 teams, because there could be a perceived favoritism towards the TA1 that's coupled to a TA2.
I think that's an excellent question that we can provide more details for. I'll tell you how we've sort of our thought processes evolved around teaming and the relationship between TA1 and TA2. So initially, when we came up with this, the idea was that let's say we had 3 TA1 performers and we have 3 TA3 performers, and the idea was that we would actually make sort of pairs and teams between TA1 and TA2, and those teams would then sort of go forward, and then that they might get changed after phase 1B. And I didn't think that was going to work. And part of that was because I also don't want there to be dependency between the success of TA1 and TA2, right? Because that's not fair, right? I mean, so that is unfair to any specific TA1 performer, is that if their success gets tied to the success of another party, that's just not right. So we went away from that structure. And so now what the structure that we're proposing is that basically that each TA1 and TA2 performer works essentially independently, and we've sort of provided some details around what is the data that TA1 has to provide to TA2 to help really develop their model, but they will not be tested on their ability to perform adjudication of TA1. And that test will be independently done. Like we might build own different agents and different inputs and outputs and simulate that. But it will not be for evaluating specific T1. It will happen in phase 2, right? In phase 2, when you're now basically doing an outcomes trial, and you have a cardiovascular agent live with real patients, randomized versus usual care, that is where T1 performance is going to, but that is not leading it to a down select, right? At that point, you're down to sort of your top performing TA. It's really about how can we improve the performance, is it working as expected, and how can we continue to improve its performance in that live setting, but that is not tied to a selection decision. I think what we can do is if you want to write this question down, we can certainly go back and make that. But part of, I think there is no restriction. The team can be both a TA1 and a TA2 performer. Like initially we had this idea that we would restrict people only to you can only apply to TA1, only apply to TA2. I think what teams have to make the case for is that, are these truly independent technologies, right? Because everyone's going to come and tell you that, we have a multi-agent system, there's a supervisory agent, everything is fine, right? But I think that you want something that's modular, that you can actually make the case that it is truly independently developed from TA1, and that will not just work well for this particular technology, but it can work for other technologies as well. So that and that we have sort of added, and there is material related to that in our solicitation, but that's an important question, and we would love to give you a more thoughtful, detailed answer, and we can add it to our FAQs.
Hi, I'm Sanjay Kumar. I'm a cardiac electrophysiologist with Access Heart, focus on access of cardiology care in rural America. Firstly, thank you very much for having us. My question to you is, are we restricted to make partnership among the applicants here in this room, or we can associated with other organizations if we?
Anyone you like. Yeah, we had, I wish we had more seats, but there's lots of people online. There's a lot of people who made teaming profiles on our website. Yeah, I wish we had a bigger venue. You can make partnerships with whoever you like.
Hi, Girish Nadkarni from Mount Sinai Health System. First of all, this is transformative, so thank you for that. I have a few questions. The first question is, we've heard a lot about the clinician voice, but you haven't heard a lot about the patient voice, and patients are sort of essential co-designers in this whole process. So would it be the responsibility of the health systems and the clinical partners in TA3 to bring that voice to the table for development of TA1 and maybe even TA2? I can go on, or you can answer.
I mean, so one of our metrics for TA1 is around usability, right? Is that how I think we use Net Promoter Score, but I'll have to see. But I think, I mean, again, TA1 is really you're building a clinical product, and you can't build a clinical product if you don't have the end user in mind. So I think that is going to be part of like making that case. Like you can't really actually. So really, it's focused on execution, especially TA1. So I think that is going to be important, and I think how we've gone through different models of how what role ARPA-H can do around sort of patient engagement. Do we build a sort of a common pool of patients, focus group, blah blah blah? But we're just leaving it to TA1, and but it's for the people here and online. That is going to be obviously that's important. I think consideration for TA1. I think for TA2, really the user is a clinician. Right, because it is not a patient-facing technology. It's really sort of it's really in some ways, if you think about it, it's more like a virtual clinician adjudicator almost, right? Where you're sort of making decisions about what can go through and what needs second review. So I think I think it is about, are you overburdening the health? Like if you're making the clinician look at everything, you're not really doing your job, right? I think about that meme, right? The security meme, anyways. But if you are letting so tier 2, the user is the clinician and the clinical team. It's really the human AI interface. If you think the clinician human AI interface is really sort of tier 2 responsibility. But yeah, so it's going to be important especially for tier 1.
And my second question is around the data that's provided by TA3 performers to train and like fine-tune the agentic system. Do you envision this to be more of a centralized data pool or more of a federated one? Because both have the advantages and disadvantages. And does it need to be de-identified? Has it to be identified?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. We've thought about this a lot, right? Because obviously, patient privacy is very important, obviously. But also you want to give builders the data they need to build successful solutions, right? And so there is a world in which the data is so sort of scrubbed down that you actually can't train anything useful from it. And so I think that's another. So we have sort of written about this in our solicitation as well. Is that how the data will be presented and how useful do we think it will be for model development is going to be important. It's a great question about federators. I mean, so the IV&V will certainly curate the data and sort of create a common data pool, but we are open to any sort of approach. I think whatever works for the individual, and then just being able to make a case that this is a good approach.
The third question, and this is a little left field, was sort of building on something you said earlier. A lot of your patients don't even know that they have heart failure. Mm-hmm. And there is a significant proportion of, as a practicing clinician, there's a significant proportion of patients who have undiagnosed heart failure that just present with symptoms but never get an echo. But there are technologies now, including AI, ECG, or AI, other things that can help diagnose undiagnosed heart failure. And is this predominantly for patients who have diagnosed heart failure, or is there potential for expanding this to have undiagnosed heart failure?
I would think only for patients with diagnosed heart failure, because again, think about your indication. In this way, what is your patient population? What is the claim you're going to make, right? What is the claim what is the studies you're going to do to justify that claim? And so I think part of how we've designed this is that we have given people a lot of really hard things to do, and we don't want everything else to be harder, right? We don't want to, because we don't want to multiply risk by asking for more and more. So for example, like with variables, like we don't tell what variable you need to use or what discovery science, we don't want to do discovery science there. We don't tell, so what we've tried to do is, so I think that would be out of scope for at least this program. It would really focus on people we're really focused on the secondary prevention population. So patients who already have a sort of either who are post-MI, but predominantly this is a program that's really focused on patients with heart failure.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks so much for having all of us. Lucy Ewing from the Coalition for Health AI Chai. It sounds like there is a lot of learnings or output from other related ARPA grants, like such as Precise AI, that would be incredibly useful for especially TA2. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of sequencing and interrelations between other related ARPA grants and how that will be expected or encouraged to kind of feed in?
Sorry, is there a way to make the microphone loud?
Can you hear me now? Sorry.
Okay, let's go.
Any of that?
I would have to ask you to go again. Sorry.
I'll project. So it sounds like the outputs and learnings from other related ARPA grants, such as Precise AI, will be incredibly useful, especially for TA2 and ground truth labeling. Can you talk a little bit about the expectation or encouragement or sort of sequencing of the different grants and how much that will be fed into this new grant?
So I would say that's pretty independent of other ARPA-H efforts. Like every program essentially stands on its own. I do think that, if teams have been engaged, for example, we have other programs, we have other teams, we have another exploratory topic called CARE ET, which is focused a lot more on generative AI evaluation. But I will say that there's no relationship or connection with any of the other programs. Again, that adds another sort of layer of complexity that we don't want. I think there's a lot of, I do want to sort of say that it's really, I think this is one of the things that's different is that, predictive AI evaluation, generative AI evaluation, I think are very, very different, right? And I think if anything, I think just because they both have AI in it, but I just think that they're really, really different technologies, the format, there's so much different about them that it'll be interesting to see how much can we learn, how much can we use from the predictive AI evaluation world and bring it to Gen AI space versus what's actually not going to work. And we're open to really sort of any sort of solution that we think is going to be effective. But we do want to see some type of either preliminary data or published data that would support this being turned into a real solution.
Thanks. Good to see you, Haider, and congrats on getting this program launched. Peter Najjar, I lead clinical innovation for Hopkins Health System. So you guys have the prohibition on the TA3 folks participating in TA1, 2. And I just want to clarify, and I'm sure a lot of my kind of health system peers are thinking about this similarly, is that, there's obviously the health system that's applying as an entity potentially to be a performer in TA3, but we've got tons of faculty in our School of Engineering and folks in the clinical enterprise who are going to want to be members of project teams that are submitting for 1 and 2. So how are you thinking about sort of delineating the entities such that we don't inhibit individual project teams from complex systems like ours from participating as performers in TA1 and 2?
An entity is defined by its UEI, so unique entity identifier. So in SAM, think back to like cage codes, DUNS, like how you're identified when you register in SAM. Now it's the UEI. That makes an entity. So I would not expect to see as a lead, a TA3 lead with their unique UEI, also then propose to TA1 or TA2 under that same UEI.
As the primary performer or?
As the prime performer. You can be on multiple proposals, but not as the prime.
Okay, thank you.
I think part of it is that because TA3 is not doing evaluation, but they're part of the evaluatory process, and it would be I think to an earlier point where there may be sort of this impression of relationship or favoritism towards a performer that if both are from the same entity. So even though they're not performing evaluation, but they are doing the implementation study. So that's why we wanted to have that. That is essentially the only restriction that we placed in, at least from the prime perspective.
So we wouldn't be disadvantaging folks who are as the health system by participating as performing as a TA3.
But we should address this in the FAQs. So I think that's another good
It
question.
might be worth looking into, because if we're thinking about it as an unfair advantage, it might become maybe a stricter restriction.
Very common amongst anyone who's at an integrated health system, obviously. Thank you.
A while back from Mount Sinai. My question is actually an extension of that one. So if it feels like the same, then we can just definitely skip it. In that, let's assume, so many health systems are working with tech companies today that might be addressing some components of these already. And there might be separate proposals submitted by two distinct entities, a tech company, for example, a health system, for example, for TA1, TA3, respectively. And that relationship that may already exist predating this may actually help to facilitate, accelerate, force multiply the capabilities. So this restriction, I assume, is not intended to exclude like the inclusion of resources or assets that might be available, for example, by the TA1 proposer via that relationship necessarily. Is that fair to say, or how might you think about that?
I think the restriction is mostly on being the prime, right?
That's the way it's structured right now. I mean, I think it's fair to have some discussion about that, whether participation then as a sub-performer, a lower tier performer on TA1 or TA2, perhaps gives them influence or some kind of advantage over others.
I mean, the de-risking is real, right? I mean, I think that if you have, I mean, so we don't want to, we certainly wouldn't use that as an exclusion, right? Obviously, like if you have a TA1 performer or TA2 performer that also works with a specific TA3 health system, and even, right, so even if they're not sort of applying as a prime, in some ways you can sort of see that as, oh, they already have some type of sort of collaborative relationship that is going to de-risk the implementation of this technology. But I think what we should do is really sort of focus on that and give you a sort of response and update our FAQs.
Again, congratulations on getting here. I know you've been working on this for years. Even before coming to ARPA.
Yeah, I had a full head of hair before I started. Yeah.
So as we've discussed before, while you were at FDA, so my name is Dave Callie, and I work for a group called Fourth Sector and Agile for Vets, supporting the Veterans Health Administration primarily. We had some experience building synthetic data sets with Precision FDA to be able to let performers, explore undiagnosed congestive heart failure, in fact, we learned a lot about being able to put that information out in a way that many teams could consume it and then provide their cards back to us. The challenge has been to move from the kind of the synthetic data digital twin space to actual production grade implementation of these types of products, and being able to do that across multiple states and with the regulatory and kind of policy and the legislative requirements as we go locally in healthcare. How are you thinking about the TA3 performers being able to influence what we need out of TA1 and 2 in order to ensure that we can implement those and make sure that they can get to production grade?
I mean, in my mind, the TA1 and 2 and TA3 have a very actually synergistic relationship, right? Where TA1 and TA2 need basically help and support and resources from TA3 to be able to build and sort of implement their product. TA3 needs to be able to work with good partners that, and if they've signed up for this, then they want to succeed. This is part of their vision. They want to do this, and they also want to get paid. And this is also part of the reason why we decided to make TA3 so that it really needs to come from the system. Like it needs to, for example, like this is a different question, but I think this idea of, and then there's also this additional question of like EHR vendors, for example. The EHR vendor may not listen to me. They're going to listen to their customer, which is a health system, right? So it really needs to, so I think having that voice and having them be the primary sort of team that is focused on implementation is very different from an ARPA-H coming to like all these different states and say, hey, you have to implement these technologies in your practices or whatever we say. So because we're not making policy, But when it comes from the health systems that serve those patient populations, that know those environments and know what is possible, and again, everything we're doing is under research protocol, right? So we're not sort of deploying this in clinical practice. We're developing this within sort of a research environment, but in a way that it can sort of instantly scale very, very quickly. And so really, I think as far as sort of managing all those sort of state by state sort of issues is concerned, in that it really that's why we don't want to be the ones doing that. Right? It really needs to come from the T3 health systems who are already in those practices, who understand their environments, who know what they can and cannot do, to be essentially the sort of executor of all those issues, which they do in all these other again, I think what I also worry about is AI exceptionalism, right? We do a lot of research, right? Health systems do a ton of research for a lot of innovative breakthrough technologies that have, yes, high risk, but high benefits. And there's no reason to think that AI should be treated any differently from all these other technologies that both come with risks and benefit, but we all see as being part of this sort of shared vision of improving health outcomes.
Maybe just for clarity again, so will the TA3 performers be able to influence kind of what the rules of the road are for TA1 and 2 performers so that they understand what it's going to take to implement?
Yes, 1,000%. So one of the meetings, one of the things that I'm really excited about is we have what's called a kickoff meeting. So once we have all the performers selected, TA1, 2, and 3, right? And now this is the coalition of the building. They all have this one goal. TA1 and 2 want to develop these technologies and deploy them in the health systems, right? Because that to them is like this is a big demonstration of their technology. It can help scale adoption, all those things. TA3 wants the same thing, but they all have to sort of come together and make a determination of what is in scope, what is out of scope, what are the standards, like what APIs can we use, what are the sort of barriers and blockers. We need to have a common orchestration platform that works across the health system. And so TA1 and 2 have this sort of what are the expected governance structures, for example. And I think I can't wait for that meeting. And part of it is because so we won't know we won't know all those answers until all of them are in the room and come together and come to a decision about what is in scope for these technologies, what is out of scope for these technologies, how many clinical resources are going to be needed to be able to implement this technology, because you can't have an army of cardiologists like manning this technology. That's not going to work. But we can't. But right now, like we can't sort of answer every single question until that meeting happens. And that's sort of the beauty of this program is that, but at the end of that, we will have the rules of engagement that everyone knows how to follow, because again, the goal is the same. And that is because there's this common incentive that is driving all of these teams together. And that's why we wanted to do active selection of these parties. All right, well, we are about to transition to, I think, one of the most exciting parts of this meeting. As I mentioned at the start, ARPA-H can catalyze this, but we can't bring this vision to light by ourselves, right? We're not a policymaker, we're not a payer, we're not a regulator, but we are in the US federal government. And this program, even though it is led by ARPA-H, has massive and important commitment and engagement from our partners across government. And it really represents a sort of one HHS project, one that has inputs from really all the other key decision makers who are going to help make this technology a reality. So now we are going to next transition into our HHS panel, which I am delighted to share includes Dr. Michelle Tarver, who is the Center Director for the Center for CDRH, whose purview AI lives at FDA. We also have Dr. Tom Keane, who is the Assistant Secretary for Technology and Policy at HHS. Formerly known as ONC. We also have Jacob Shiff, who's the Chief AI and Tech Officer of CMMI. And so we'll be hearing from all of them, and you'll see just how coordinated we are in helping this broad vision come to life. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone, for sticking around. We will get started with our HHS panel. It is my great honor, and I'm delighted that we're joined by Dr. Michelle Tarver. Dr. Tarver is an ophthalmologist by way of Johns Hopkins. She's the Center Director of CDRH. And we are so pleased that you're able to join us today as part of our HHS panel. Online, we have Jacob Shiff. Jacob, I know you wanted to be here, but it's great to have you virtually. Jacob is the Chief AI and Technology Officer, CMMI. He's been responsible for so many of the cool initiatives that CMMI has rolled out, and he'll be talking about those and how everything ties together. And we're soon to be joined by Dr. Tom Keane, right on cue, and who is the Assistant Secretary for Technology Policy at HHS. So please give a round of applause for Dr. Michelle Tarver, Dr. Tom Keane, and Jacob online to join us.
That is arguably the best timed entrance I've ever had.
Amazing. You're getting good at this. No, I mean, I think that I just want to start off by, it's been so great to have, to have gotten to know both of you, first when I was at FDA and then recently in ARPA-H, and to be able to really bring this vision together, because we know that, we can't do this alone, right? ARPA-H is not a policy shop. We're not a payer, but what we want to do is be thoughtful about how we make our investments to advance spaces that are of critical importance both to patients and also to the industry. So I know we're not supposed to say it, we can't say that we have a favorite center, right, at FDA, but CDRH is my favorite center. And I think part of it is that what I didn't realize is that a drug is a drug. But CDRH sees all sorts of different technologies that you couldn't even imagine. And so I think what that does is that attracts a lot of people who are just, who are not very rigid, who are sort of used to seeing different things come through, from brain implants to mitral, artificial valves, AI-enabled technologies, et cetera. And, when it comes to AI, I think it's very clear that, FDA has really been at the forefront of enabling AI technologies to reach the bedside. And one of the things that I think a lot of people would love to hear more about is that you've made some recent advances to unlock clinical decision support. So Dr. Tarver, would love to have you share more about how those recent FDA advances, especially in the CDS space, might impact novel generative and agentic AI technologies.
Thank you. One of the things that I want to remind everyone about is what we do at CDRH, because sometimes people aren't fully grounded on the spectrum of products. I think you alluded to it, but we do everything from regulating devices that diagnose, manage, monitor, and treat conditions through a mechanical process, right? A huge spectrum of devices. So you're thinking about everything from a tongue depressor to a brain-computer interface device. Incredible complexity that we're increasingly seeing over the years. We're really centered on ensuring that we empower people to have the devices, the information that they need to make informed decisions. And along that continuum, it requires that we remain committed to our mission of not only protecting, but also promoting the health and well-being of the nation. That requires that we innovate while keeping safety in mind. And a lot of the efforts that you've seen in the digital health technology space are a testament to that. We did our first authorization of an AI-enabled medical device in 1995. A lot of years. And since then, we've had almost 1,400 devices that we have authorized that are AI-enabled in every clinical area in many different types of contexts. So you can see that the appetite is not only wet, but it's expanding. What I would say, the things that we have done and put in place to help facilitate that happening is clear and predictable pathways. And you alluded to some of the things that we've done, but I want to back up even a little bit more and say we understand that the folks that are developing devices in our space are often not the traditional medical device manufacturers. They're not familiar with all the regulations and all the other processes that you go through to get a product from development to market access. So we've created resources, tools, other things to help facilitate that change. We have a regulatory accelerator that has a lot of index resources for people to use. We've encouraged you to come and have an early orientation meeting with our staff. So it's almost like a show and tell, where you show us your technology. We're asking questions in a free space that allows us to understand the technology. So when the submission comes forward, a lot of our questions are already addressed. And we also have a digital health navigator. And the other thing that I mentioned is the importance of predictability and clarity. Guidance is usually the tool that we use to do that. And we understand that guidances, when we write them, they're not meant to be static. We want them to live and evolve and adapt to contemporary times. And that is exactly what we've done with our guidance. We are required to look at them and see, are things different? Is a clinical condition different? Are the risks and benefits different? Has technology changed and our familiarity with the technology changed so that we can loosen some of the regulation around it? We declassify as well as update guidance documents. And one of the recent one is the clinical decision support guidance, where we have recognized there's a lot of algorithms out there doing a lot of different things. Some of it's just to advise people like me and the rest of us on here about, there's a lot of literature in this space. What's the recommendation that everybody would use? Do we need to regulate that? Maybe not. And that's what the clinical decision support guidance update is reflecting. The other things that we've done is understanding that the technology iterates at such a rapid clip that we're not going to be able to regulate our way through that. So we've got to create flexibility so that software is not impaired from correcting, adapting, and updating and causing gaps in patient care. So we have done the predetermined change control plan guidance, which essentially is saying, we know it's going to change, specified in advance when you're coming in, and as long as those changes are within the scope of your market authorized use, then you don't need to come back into us. Just make the changes. It's a way that we can partner together to ensure that people have the information that they need, the devices that they need, and we don't have to create interrupted care. And the last thing that I do want to mention is that everything that we're doing is recognizing that care is essentially shifting from a traditional clinical context into the home or closer to home. And we're going to be leveraging clinical providers that are not specialists necessarily, but they're going to have to be able to be empowered to make specialized decisions. A lot of the efforts that are happening right now, we have Home as a Healthcare Hub, are to move that forward. And so we're really excited about Advocate. We're ready and raring to go and partnering with you all because we understand that we as regulators have to help be an agent of change to move the field forward.
Amazing. So, part of my job as a PM is really sort of going out and talking to the community and thinking about, what are the different blockers that might prevent this technology stack from coming to be. And one of the concerns that I hear often is around issues with accessing data, accessing APIs, and my usual refrain is, Dr. Keane will take care of it. But just, this has been such a core sort of, I think, you've been sort of talking about this, and ASTP has been at work and making sure that we achieve data liquidity. Talk to us more about, some of the steps you've taken and also what you anticipate in the future as we make data available not just to patients, but also to the builders who are building exciting technologies that are going to transform outcomes.
Yeah, first I want to say thanks to Haider for inviting me to this, and congratulations on the Advocate model, and Jacob, congratulations on the Access model. And I've had the opportunity to collaborate with Michelle. They're doing extraordinary things, evolving regulations at the FDA, and so I'm honored to be on the same panel with you guys. And I forget who said it once, but I think they had gathered 50 doctors in a room, and somebody said, we've got 50 doctors in a room, we've got a $200 million business here. As I look out at the folks here, I can't imagine with the brain power in this room, this is like a $10 billion business here. So I know you guys all have busy days, and I just want to thank you all for coming to this. So to the question that you asked, what are we doing about data liquidity? We understand that in order for AI to work and in order for patients to have care particular to their needs, you need data. And the focus of my tenure in this job is data liquidity. And so what are we doing to make that happen? Well, first of all, you probably saw about a week or two ago at the JP Morgan Health Conference that Claude and HealthX announced that they have built a personal AI assistant, a health assistant built on Claude. And the assistant works by pulling data through the exchange network that we operate at ASTP, the TEFCA exchange network. And at least early reviews of how the application is working is that it's working very well. We will continue to support and evolve the TEFCA network continue to address the growing pains that come with the network so that we can realize a vision of nationwide data liquidity where anybody in this room can identify themselves on an app and be able to pull all of their health data from all of its sources into the app so that you can leverage it with AI or whatever other application you would want. So TEFCA is the first. The second is that we understand data is exchanged through the application programming interfaces, the API. And up until now, the certification program for health IT was really focused around getting a baseline functionality in EHRs. For those of you who don't know, the rapid adoption of electronic health records was a result of government action. Back in 2010, providers were mandated to adopt EHRs, and the government, through various channels, allocated about $50 billion, a huge sum of money, to make this happen. And in order to make this happen in an intelligent way, the Health IT Certification Program specified the functionality that health IT systems had to have. As you guys probably saw in our proposed rule, we're pivoting. Instead of having 60 health IT certification criteria, we're leaving only 19 of those in place, and we're modifying all of the rest. And we're pivoting towards regulating application programming interfaces so that we can specify how information has to be exchanged, its latency, the information itself that has to be exchanged, the functionality of the API, the documentation that has to accompany it, so that people can do everything from individuals pulling specific data elements all the way up to broad population health use cases. So that's the second thing we're doing, regulating APIs. And then the third is we intend to enforce the information blocking regulation. We made an announcement, and Secretary Kennedy made an announcement that we would be enforcing this. And while I'm surrounded by lawyers all the time telling me what I can and cannot say, I will say that we are going to enforce the information blocking regulation. And that involves not just working with the Office of Inspector General. It involves working with DOJ on anti-competitive business practices and FTC on antitrust actions against folks in the market who might be information blocking. So those are sort of three things. I could go on, but I'll stop there.
It's a really impressive list. I'll switch to Jacob. Jacob, you've been really, I mean, it's been amazing getting to see you go to work, go in founder mode in the government. I mean, CMMI has been busy making all these like amazing initiatives that I think are really going to have a transformative impact on unlocking the power of digital health for every American. Let me first start with access, because I think that's really that you've been so central to that, and I do think that has major implications for tech-driven medical care. I'd love to hear, in your words, the origin of access, really the why behind it, and how might it apply to generative and agentic AI technologies deployed in clinical care.
Absolutely, and it's great to be on this panel with an amazing group of people who I've had the privilege to work with. So wish I was there in person, but virtual will suffice. So I'll get some context on access, but before doing that, I can take a little bit of a step back. So of course, everyone in this panel has their unique domain in which they can really drive forward progress. And within CMS, that's the payments and the payment model. And within the CMS Innovation Center, also known as CMMI, we have this, I think of it as a unique superpower, which is the ability to test new ways of paying for care at scale in order to improve outcomes and reduce costs. And in my role, I'm particularly focused on how can we leverage that superpower to enable the fullest potential of technology. In that role, I've had the privilege of speaking with hundreds, if not 1,000, organizations that are in the market today and are attempting or successfully using technologies to do that. And I typically ask them some basic questions. Essentially, that comes down to what do you do, what's working, and what's holding that back. And there were three very clear themes. The first being that what is possible has never been more exciting when it comes to technology and care delivery, giving every clinician superpowers and more leverage, enabling every patient to have continuous proactive support, enabling every practice to operate more efficiently. So that was theme one. Theme two is that where technology is being most rapidly adopted does not necessarily map to that potential, in part because technology is a tool that reacts to the incentives of the system. And the dominant incentives in our system today reward billing activity and intensity. And not surprisingly, that's where we're seeing the most technology deployed. So that's specifically revenue cycle management and the like. Also shifting towards uses of technology that free up non-reimbursable activities that can be moved towards reimbursable time. Not necessarily the fullest potential that I described at first. And then the third is that very specifically, the payment options that do exist really do not accommodate technology-enabled care, and that's because fee-for-service pays for activities, and if the way you deliver care does not map to one of those winning activities, you're out of luck. Shared savings models do better align incentives, but the challenge there is that it's very difficult to determine what are the savings that are associated with a new way of treating heart failure, a new way of treating depression. Well, it's very difficult to do that. So in practice, the payment options that do exist really do not accommodate the fullest potential of technology-enabled care. We identified this gap in the market. Going back to that superpower I was describing earlier, felt that we had the opportunity, frankly, the responsibility to introduce something that would realize that potential. And that's what the access model is focused on with this new outcome-aligned payment option. I can provide a maybe 1 minute overview of that, Haider, if that's helpful on the access model itself. Absolutely. So the access model focuses on enabling technology-enabled care for chronic conditions by introducing a new payment option that emphasizes outcomes rather than activities and gives clinical organizations a greater degree of flexibility around how they achieve those outcomes, including through the use of technology. So that organizations that choose to get paid in this way, which can be a technology company that enrolls in Medicare or a traditional provider, chooses to get paid in this way, and they receive predictable payments for helping patients within qualifying conditions. And they only earn their full payment if the patient achieves improvement relative to where they started around defined outcomes. So in the case of hypertension, that's a reduction in their blood pressure. In the case of depression, it's a reduction in their depression symptoms via a validated patient-reported outcome measure. And importantly, now clinicians, clinical organizations can really innovate around how best to get there. And in 2026, that means through the innovative use of a lot of technologies. I want to go back to the fact that we have this HHS-wide panel. We really wanted to make sure that we were innovating in our lane and removing the parts that were not working, which, for example, were reimbursement-related constraints, but really reinforcing the existing guardrails and processes that are working. So, for example, the compliance with the relevant rules and regulations as it relates to the use of technologies, including those that are classified as a device, complying with FDA. And we actually identified that there was a unique opportunity in the access model because of the clinical supervision that it provides, the rigorous capture of outcome measures, and also there's a randomization component. It sort of created a unique context in which to innovate on the regulatory side. And that was an exciting pilot that we announced in December in collaboration with Michelle and team called the Tempo pilot. On the ASTP side, we wanted to ensure that we were reinforcing data interoperability. So one of the requirements is that an organization that chooses to get paid in this way, not only do they need to proactively share an update with the referring clinician or primary care practitioner, they also have to integrate with health information exchange or the equivalent so that any clinician can pull those updates and constantly be kept in the loop so that we're really facilitating the coordination between these technology-enabled care organizations and traditional organizations that are delivering care. So that gives a little bit of a flavor. We really feel that this outcome-aligned payment approach will create the right context in which a lot of innovation that is truly working and driving measurable impact can ultimately not just be accommodated, but can really scale up and thrive. And we can channel innovation towards what really matters most, which is better health at an affordable cost.
And I don't mean to step on the moderator, but just echoing what Jacob said, one of the challenges that we have in information exchange is that information that goes from an electronic health record or a provider to an app, there's some concern that that app is not a HIPAA-covered entity and isn't governed by all of the rules regarding privacy and security of information. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jacob, but under the access model, these apps enroll as Part B providers and will therefore be subject to all of the HIPAA regulations. Am I understanding that correctly?
100%. These are HIPAA-covered entities that need to fully comply with all of the requirements that I think were quite thoughtfully designed around that. So it really resolves a lot of that ambiguity.
So as a radiologist, I've had to face the prospect of, before my intended retirement age, of a machine being able to do my job. And that's actually no joke. That will actually be a real thing. But now we see that apps are going to be providers in the truest sense of the word, and that they will be enrolled in Medicare. But that creates an opportunity because it allows those apps to be governed by the HIPAA privacy and security protections.
Well, I hope I have a little bit of a longer runway before they start doing surgery too. But I will say,
we're coming for you.
The Tempo pilot is really a great partnership. I think the collaboration across HHS has really been remarkable because the Tempo pilot opens up an opportunity for those devices that may have been a wellness device, let's say, but really want a medical device indication to come in, apply to be part of that program if they fit in the 4 different areas that Jacob clearly outlined. And then we will look at that protocol, their evidence collection plan, and do enforcement discretion for it on a case-by-case basis based on that plan, and really partner and leverage the collection of real-world data to inform our decision-making. It creates a natural, fluid transition of collecting data in a way as part of your business plan that can then inform a regulatory decision. It's really a novel intersection of 3 different arenas. And I really encourage you all, it's open now for you to apply if you're interested or your colleagues are interested in this Tempo pilot. It's open now through, we're going to start making decisions in March. So we're going to have a webinar, and I encourage you to listen in the next week or so. But it really is a way that we're trying to foster innovation, appropriately calibrate the regulatory oversight to encourage innovation.
Before I move forward, I do want to talk about some of the tech shenanigans we're having in this room. But Jacob, it's so great you can stick around. The frame that they have you frozen on, it's like really pensive. It's like you're judging us. And how did I get stuck with all these people? But you sound great. It's like, there's a divine voice just educating us. Yeah, well, I didn't say it, but I think you bring such clarity. You communicate this so well. Dr. Tarver, back to you. I think one of the things that in my sort of central thesis, as far as especially for generative AI, is that there's so much more we can learn in the post-market about these technologies, just given how context sensitive they are. Taking a step back, when you think about as director of CDRH, how are you thinking about post-market monitoring for generative and for AI? How does risk and benefit come into play? I would just love your sort of overall thoughts. And the other thing I'd love you to sort of, we have some of the best and smartest people from the private sector here, and they really want to help. Like, what would your message be to them about how they can contribute to building a better ecosystem that is truly lives up to the learning health system sort of ideal that we have?
So I love that question because it really brings into focus how we look at all medical devices. We look at them across the total product life cycle, meaning, we are a very engineer-driven organization. And so we are thinking about the iterative cycles, the changes, the updates that are regularly made to medical devices. With that total product life cycle approach means that there needs to be some post-market surveillance, monitoring, watching of how it performs. And with algorithms, I think it's even critically important, especially AI-enabled algorithms. When you look in the post-market, it depends on the input, what the output will be. And so whether I'm at a quaternary care hospital that has the state-of-the-art imaging device, or I'm sitting in rural America with an imaging device that may be 20, 30, 40 years old, I should be able to get the same output using that algorithm, and I should be able to trust it as a provider. That is what post-market monitoring really does. It looks to see, are we getting what we expect over time, that it's not hallucinating, that it's not going to be biased by the different inputs. And so therefore, our providers can trust the output. I think one of the things that we did to try to encourage this behavior is to put out the post-market, the AI lifecycle post-market monitoring guidance document, which is a draft guidance. So it's not really here to say this is what you have to do now, but it's to kind of shed a light to start thinking about it. Because the only way that you're going to get providers to increasingly uptake and trust is if they know that what they're getting from the algorithms is actually delivering the outcomes they need to make informed decisions. We have heard from various provider communities that that's where their concerns are, because they're held liable at the end of the day. And so post-market monitoring is a good way to get ahead of it. And we as developers, as regulators, we're charged as being stewards of the data that we're collecting. And so there is a responsibility that comes with that, as it's for having that privilege. And part of that is ensuring that we ensure that the devices continue to perform as expected. So we're really encouraging companies to think about it, think about what their post-market surveillance plan will be at the time of their pre-market development, because sometimes this can roll right through it and continuously iterate, as opposed to trying to think about it after they get a marketing decision. So those are some of the things that we have been talking about, as well as trying to help improve the quality of data that we're all going to be relying on, because sometimes this can feed back and inform our pre-market decisions too, right? Expanded labeled indications is an opportunity for some of this data to be helpful, not only in the post-market realm, but in the pre-market realm. And it's going to be even more important as we're thinking about, agentic or generative AI solutions.
So Dr. Keane, one of the fun parts about just building this program was really all the engagement I got to do with the ecosystem, and it was interesting. Like one day you're talking to a sort of $1 trillion company, the other day you're talking to a guy in his basement vibe coding a cardiology bot. But I think what's nice about this, what's been really interesting, is that you have both sort of large companies, startups. It's really that there's just so much diversity in how people are trying to approach this really, really important problem. And the best thing is I'm not just talking to one entity, one vendor that is basically that controls all the nodes. How is ASTP thinking about making sure that this remains a competitive marketplace, that this remains an even playing field where everyone can sort of enter and have the same set of shared rules and is able to impact how we deliver care?
Well, we have a couple of mechanisms. First, as I alluded to earlier in our proposed rule, which is out, which I would encourage all of you guys go to regulations.gov and comment on, we are proposing to of the 60 regulations on certified health IT, we are only leaving 19 in place untouched, and that should significantly lower barriers to market entry. We had the privilege yesterday of meeting with a startup company getting into the electronic health record realm, and they told us that the significant scaling back of regulations that we are proposing makes it much easier for them to enter the market. So that's first. Second, as I alluded to by data liquidity, point solutions or say agentic cardiologists that need to access data in order to work should have access to that data at low or no cost for the benefit of the patient. And the data liquidity initiatives we're undertaking should help improve competitiveness in the market by making data a commodity rather than something that can be sold for profit. Third, in the AI realm, as you see in our deregulatory rule, we have proposed, and we would love to hear your comments on, removing some of the regulations around AI. They've been in place. The one regulation in particular has been in place for about a year. We did an analysis on it, and we found that it wasn't necessarily being helpful. And if anything, it might be a little hurtful because it threatened intellectual property for some startups. So scaling back the AI regulations is another tool that we're using. And finally, my title is actually as probably the longest in the federal government, or at least I hope it is. If it's not, I'm going to try and add some parts onto it during my tenure. But my technical title is the Assistant Secretary for Technology Policy / National Coordinator for Health Information Technology. And I would appreciate it if any of you meet me like out there, that you please address me using the entire phrase. but the main word in that actually counts as coordinator. We meet with and talk with everybody, and we actually have in our legislative origination privileges to meet and collaborate with the community that extend beyond most federal actors. We're actually able to do things that other actors can't. And part of my job is actually meeting with and talking with everybody in the market so that we can meet the market where it is. And so that's an invitation to all of you, if you have business before us, to reach out. So those are sort of 4 things we're thinking about.
I'll now turn to the skies to address Jacob. I mean, one of the sort of design choices that we had to make for this program was, where do you start, right? Where do you what is the right problem to fix? And there feels like there's so many, and we went with heart failure. What do what makes you, and we've talked about this, and I will say that Access does not yet have a heart failure tier, so we're hoping that data that we collect is actually going to contribute to innovative sort of payment models in that space. But just for the audience who may not be familiar, from both cost, quality, and sort of payment perspective, what do you think makes heart failure a unique or sort of appropriate use case for this type of technology, in your opinion?
Well, I think heart failure is a heartbreaking example of the gap between what is possible and the status quo. I'm not a clinician, but I've heard some of these statistics around the mortality benefits of getting people onto guideline-directed medical therapy and the adoption of that. And there was a technology gap there, but really that's about a lot of failures along the way. And so I think it is absolutely an area where we need to solve that. And in many ways, the incentives always come front and center, because if there's no why, the how doesn't really matter. So I think in general, heart failure is an area that we need to innovate around on the payment model side in particular. As it relates to access, by the way, so we, as you alluded to, we did announce a variety of conditions specifically grouped into 4 tracks. A track is a grouping of conditions that are typically comorbid and usually have shared types of interventions. So this is conditions in the cardiometabolic space or cardio-kidney metabolic space, such as prediabetes, obesity, dyslipidemia, and hypertension, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, and heart disease. In the behavioral health space, it's depression and anxiety. And in the musculoskeletal space, it's chronic MSK pain. As you mentioned, we did not include to start a heart failure track, but we explicitly said that we intend to add additional tracks throughout the model. And heart failure was just below the line, but it's one that we absolutely would welcome expanding to. And you can really imagine and think about all of the conditions that this type of outcome-aligned payment option can expand to, because at its core, it's really about defining what is the minimal targeted set of clinical biomarkers or patient-reported outcomes that matter, defining a clear payment rate and a target, and then the rest takes care of itself. And the technologies can be adopted. Because one thing I personally feel very strongly about is that in 2026, the hot new effective technology may be an app. In 2030, it may be a humanoid robot that visits you at your home and delivers some sort of intervention. We really want to get out of the practice of micromanaging the how and clearly communicating and measuring the what. And we think that that's most appropriate. So to your question about heart failure, I think it is absolutely an example where the access approach can expand to, and we absolutely need to bridge that gap more generally. CMMI, we did also announce an adjacent model or another model as well that's called the ambulatory specialty model. By the way, I'll pause for a second. Are you able to hear me clearly?
You sound great.
Okay, wonderful. Am I still stuck on my pensive look?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Please smile.
I kind of had that Men in Black style, just like erase your memory, because I can't even imagine what you guys are looking at right now. But hopefully, anyways, hopefully at some point we'll have an in-person opportunity. So just to round out what I was saying earlier, so we do have an adjacent model that does more directly speak to heart failure. This is the ambulatory specialty model. That model in particular is focused on creating incentives for cardiologists today to really most effectively treat heart failure. It incorporates certain payment-related features such as shared savings or a target benchmark. So it's an interesting model, and absolutely I think between access and what's to come there, ASM and the incentives that it creates, and then of course all the great work that you're doing at ARPA-H, I'm really hopeful that if we had this panel again in 3 years, certainly in 5 years, we would not be starting it off with the gap between what's possible and what is, and hopefully we'll have closed that gap.
That's amazing. So we have a lot of people who traveled here from and who want to be part of this community, and they didn't know that they'll be getting this gift of this amazing HHS panel. So I do want to provide them the opportunity to maybe ask some questions of the folks who are here. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand.
So this is a technology question here. I've been looking into something about we do a lot of defense and aerospace stuff, and so I'm really into national security systems and that kind of stuff as well. Because of that, I'm really into the cryptography side of things, cybersecurity, all that kind of issues. And I was looking into it, and it seems that HIPAA is not considered to be it's not related to the national security systems, and so therefore it is not required to follow the NSA 2.0 standards for post-quantum security. Now, given the long lifetime of health data and the importance of keeping it encrypted for a long time, it seems short-sighted that there's not a post-quantum cryptography, as far as I'm aware, any kind of post-quantum cryptography deadline for health data.
So excellent point. I think the whole world, as quantum computing becomes diffuses, all of our cryptography and all of our security systems are at risk. All of them. And obviously, the intelligence community, the national security community has to think 10 steps ahead because they are probably more than anybody subject to attacks. The beauty of the way we, A, administer our programs and B, stand up our TEFCA network is that as the market evolves, we can evolve with it. And so TEFCA is a distributed network. It's right now, I think there's 12 qualified health information networks that operate on it. All of them have individual policies on how they do data protection, how they do onboarding. Probably we're going to throw more, not regulations, but more conditions on them as things evolve. But it gives the opportunity. If let's say quantum computing tomorrow were to be turned on everywhere, and all of a sudden all of our current security mechanisms were, as a result, undone, we have the opportunity through a decentralized network to very quickly try and deploy solutions.
I just want to, with regards to the NSA issues, one of the things that they've identified, the reason why they're doing it sooner rather than later, is because there are bad actors out there who are harvesting data now and can decrypt it later. And so that's the reason why it's not, it's too late once you have the quantum computers, because they've already been harvesting the data and they can decrypt it now, all the stuff they've already harvested. And that's why the NSA has said they have January 1st, 2027 deadline, is because they're aware of this, anything that has a long timeline, it's already too late.
You know what, this is actually very helpful that you point this out, and I can bring this back both to my colleagues at ASTP, but importantly at the Office of Civil Rights. We actually currently don't specify, none of the HHS offices specify a cryptographic standard for protecting health data. This is done by the individual EHRs and the individual systems. But it's something that we should probably think about more, and I appreciate you bringing it up.
This question is for the Assistant Secretary for Technology Policy and National Coordinator for Health Information Technology, Dr. Keane.
Thank you.
And so...
you even threw in the doctor part.
Doing my best. And it's a comment leading into a question. And so first off, thank you for the great work you're doing on making the data more available for all of us to be able to interoperate with. And I think there's a lot of conversation about the patient data being accessible. We work with a dozen plus health systems nationally. And one of the major problems we run into is the provider, the system level data also not being interoperable or accessible. And most often, perhaps I would say every single time, the systems want to be able to provide access to that. I'm thinking scheduling decision trees, provider data, provider calendars, all that sort of stuff. And so this is a comment, and the question is of what might you recommend as like a way to provide that feedback? Is it commenting on the new the open commenting period on regulations.gov with this, or how can we kind of bring that to the surface to try and address that side of data accessibility as well?
Let me first say that this is the administrative data, including the provider data and the scheduling data, is something that we're looking at putting in our HTI-6 rule. As you know, it's a very complicated problem. My colleagues at CMS are constantly updating their provider directory and are at least now trying to come out with one directory to rule them all. And we're very supportive of that effort. We are considering all of these things in our HTI-6 rule, which we hope to put out this summer. The question is, how do we get input? Well, you can reach out to us directly. But you can also put this in the comments for the HTI-5 rule, even though the beauty of your comments are, number one, we actually read them all, every last one. That's why the rulemaking process is so long. And secondly, the comments that you give us some latitude in how we create the rules. So if there's something we didn't think of that we didn't put in the initial rule, we can actually extend and change the rule based on the comments that we get. The lawyers call that logical outgrowth. So even if it's not germane to our particular rule, we would love to hear those comments. And we also have other avenues. You can reach out to us directly and tell us. And certainly when we put out the HTI-6 rule, there's going to be administrative use cases addressed in that. So that'll be another opportunity to comment. But we are well aware of the challenges and how important a use case this is. And actually, my colleagues from ASTP back there, Armand, Jesse, and Mark, we were just in a rulemaking meeting yesterday, hair pulling over this. So,
hi, I'm Robbie Freeman. I'm the Chief Digital Transformation Officer at the Mount Sinai Health System. I wanted to ask about the CMS, the pledge from CMS to kill the clipboard, and I'm wondering if there's a dot to connect with the advocate program, the access model, and some of the goals there to make sure we're following the right standards for patient identity, make sure we're reducing administrative burden, and following the standards for exchanging data. Because I think that as consumers start doing more discussions with AI agents, it's going to be important that we ensure you're talking with the right person, that we're verifying identity, and that we have the right standards around data sharing. So is there a dot to connect with some of those goals in the spirit of the pledge with both, the access model and the advocate program?
I think that's a question for Jacob or Haider.
Jacob, do you want to take a stab at it?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in briefly. So the way that a lot of these pieces really nicely fit together is that, of course, Tom, Dr. Keane, and his team are really establishing a lot of the great standards. And then on the CMS side, we have a few tools to support the adoption of these standards. One, of course, is the incentives and the payment model, and that's where access really comes in. And then there's been amazing work that's been done within the health tech ecosystem, really around voluntary pledges to move things forward as quickly as possible. And in particular, some areas that have been identified there include identity standards or adoption of identity. So you can almost think of that component as being, let's ensure the building blocks are there, and then the model like access, for example, is the incentive to use those building blocks to deliver better care. Specifically as it relates to identity and ensuring that the entity that is requesting the data is the right one, I would likely defer to Dr. Keane or to other colleagues, because that, of course, is a very relevant and important question as we do support data liquidity to make sure that it's flowing to the right place. So I don't know if anyone else on the panel wants to speak a little more to that element of the question.
I mean, with regards to advocate, I think, the role that I think ARPA-H is poised to play is really, de-risking, technological initiatives that otherwise wouldn't be on strategic roadmaps because of all these other limitations that people face, and then use those to then build and overcome all of these issues that that otherwise would be very hard to either regulate or expect or evaluate in the absence of a real sort of example. I mean, this this pertains not just to all the things we've talked about, but there I often get asked about legal questions around liability for these technologies, and again, there's no case law because there's no use case. And so really, I think to me, Advocate, obviously it's my program. I think it's the best program in the world. But the idea is that, how do you, so we use our position in government to be able to really advance fields and our convening power in its wake to be able to address all sorts of issues, whether those are related to cybersecurity, and as long as we have a roadmap in place. So that's the vision, and I feel like we'll learn a lot through this process, not just for the performers who are in this team, but really for the entire field.
Okay, thank you so much. My question is about the FDA post-market surveillance. There was a great point from Haider that these AI models evolve as the pre-evolved the large language models, right? Then with the new version get updated, then the performance will change. And also there's human in the loop where we provide feedback, or reinforcement learning with human feedback to make the model works better. So with that even after FDA approval, right, then the post-market surveillance will be it's really a new landscape. I wonder whether your thoughts about that. Thank you.
So absolutely, it's so what I talked about in terms of the draft guidance is an acknowledgement that post-market evaluation of these technologies is going to be critically important, right? Because it is going to continuously learn, it's going to adapt, it's going to change. And so how do we start thinking about that now? To your point of how do we design a study to measure that and what does it look like? I think that's part of the ongoing conversation. We are looking at such a rapid evolution of technology. It's happening so quickly. So we're all going to have to learn together. How do we design a study? It's not going to be necessarily the traditional approach we've used for hardware-based devices because it's changing all the time. It's learning all the time. It's not a contained cohort as we usually identify and think of a contained cohort. So I think that's part of what we're asking people to come in. Let's start talking about it now. Let's start envisioning what those studies look like now because we're all going to learn from one another.
I'm not sure this is going to be a short question. I'm Christina Silcox from the Duke Margolis Institute of Health Policy. And I'd actually like to add on to that the FDA question because I was very interested when I saw this idea around the supervisory agent being an MDD tool. And of course, software being able to be an MDD tool is fairly new and something, and is normally more specified, right? The indication and population of use. And so I'd love to just hear a little bit about how FDA is thinking about MDDT and development and verification in kind of this broader context.
MDDT is the medical device development tools. It's really a way to accelerate regulatory evaluation of medical devices so that you don't have to develop it yourself. You can leverage something that has a defined context of use. And if you're using it within that context of use, we don't need to see validity data for it. So it's really to try to create optimization and efficiency in medical device evaluation. We have MDDTs that are for non-clinical indications. So there are some software ones, but they're not in the vein of what you're describing. And we have them for clinical outcome assessments. Looking at a supervisory agent as a tool, indication, meaning it is going to be looking at data, it's going to be aggregating it, and it's going to be flagging when there are challenges. What that model looks like is something that could be an MDDT. And so if folks are interested in that avenue, please come in and have a conversation with us. I think it's really helpful. I want to stress one point. People often think about the regulatory part way down the road. And that's sometimes too late. Come talk to us early. Give us an idea of what you're thinking about, because there may be ways that we can help address the friction that you might otherwise encounter if we know what's coming down the pipeline. And also having a fluid conversation. We've got a lot of scientists. We've got really smart doctors of all kinds of specialties at the agency who are also passionate about creative solutions. So come talk to us early. And I think it really can help inform what your development pathway looks like.
Before we end, we have Jacob wants to talk a little bit about the access timeline and applications.
Thanks, Haider. I just wanted to reinforce or clarify that the access model, which we've been discussing, the applications for that are open. The first deadline is April 1st. The model goes live in July. This is a 10-year model with rolling applications. And not only is it in original Medicare, but we're also really thrilled to be seeing the general momentum behind other payers looking to align around a similar payment approach. So definitely, if you're in the world or looking to get involved with technology-enabled care delivery, please make sure you check out the model website.
Awesome. So before we wrap up, I do want to give a shout out to Arman Sharma, who has been a critical partner for me in this program, in this journey. He has really been a coordinator across OpDivs and really given us a license to go after hard problems. And so I really appreciate all your help. This has been a lot of fun. We're just getting started. Thank you everyone online and here. Everyone, we have some VIPs coming to talk about a grand vision of ARPA-H and how Advocate ties into not just what we're doing here at the agency, but across the government. Thank you so much to everyone who's presented lightning talks. You're seeing, the people who are working on this are extremely serious. They're bringing so many capabilities. I think that there's so many opportunities to develop new ways of doing this that maybe even we didn't think about. I'm sure that many of you came in with sort of a specific idea and are going to leave with something else. And I feel like we're going to feel the same way, that we have this vision of the program, but in the end, the program that we end up with is going to be different from what we just imagined, because we didn't have you all partnering with us and providing your own contributions from a creative perspective, capabilities perspective, et cetera. While we wait, I'm up for more questions. So I know that there a lot of people have had questions, and I want to make myself available for more.
Yeah, Haider, I understand that the program is mostly about chronic condition management. And how about those like surgeries, right? Whether, down the road, the patient needs surgery, those kind of decision making, will that be part of the scope?
Yes. So in the sense that, I think about, a patient with chronic disease, they face like 1,000 decisions. Right? They get tests, they get imaging, they see a doctor, they have symptoms, and then they have questions. And right now, where are they getting those questions from? Where are they getting those answers from? They can go to the clinician, they can get answers there. Most patients we know are actually just going to the internet or using large foundation models to be able to answer those questions. I think that's a really important role for this technology to be able to provide that type of personalized information back to the patient. So with this idea about, proposed treatment plan. And we certainly think that it should still be the clinician who makes the definitive treatment plan, but this technology should be able to guide patients around these sort of key decision points that come up during the trajectory of anyone who lives with chronic disease, but particularly for patients with heart failure or patients who have had NMIs, because they face so many of these big decisions. And I think that for this technology to be useful, it has to be able to support that decision making.
So just want to clarify scope, because looking at the ISO, we were told to follow the ISO. Looks like the TA1 is describing what seems to be a full stack cardiologist doing treatment, diagnosis and treatment across all of cardiology. The trials are focused on diagnosed heart failure post-MI, but it could be anticoagulation duration. It could be pretty much full scope. They could have a new complaint of some sort that comes up. So just want to clarify, and related to that, the sort of the intermediate synthetic data testing that happens at the end of phase A and 2, is that like free for all in terms of it could be new diagnosis of myocarditis, so is that, I guess I'm just trying to make sure that the agent, is it really supposed to replicate all the functionality of a cardiologist? However, the patient population will be limited because that will be great for outcomes. And is that a fair assessment?
So, I think, so that's a good question. I think as far as scope is concerned, because I think that's really what the question is about, is, how do you in fact scope this technology? And I think that part of it is that there's some things that we've identified, like these are things we want to do from a functionality perspective.
right? But as far as the exact specific scope of what this technology can do, I think that will be fully determined after we have our kickoff meeting and we have buy-in and consensus from the health systems. So I'll get to your second question afterwards, because we have a special guest here today. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Alicia Jackson. And Dr. Alicia Jackson is a PhD from MIT. She's the director of ARPA-H. She brings all the experiences that you'd want from someone who is leading this agency. Like, she was a program manager herself at DARPA. She was an office director in the Biological Technologies Office at DARPA. And then she went to the private sector where she was a founder, CEO, and an investor. So she has this amazing kaleidoscopic view of this ecosystem from every single perspective. I'm very, very grateful for Alicia joining ARPA-H, not just as a PM, but as an American. This is such an amazing time to be in this field, and we need leaders like her to be really the tip of the spear who are going to help us win this war for scientific supremacy. So,
yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Haider. Thank you so much. Thanks very much. It is a pleasure to be here today. Welcome, everybody here in person, everybody online. You are the most important people in the room because you're actually going to be the ones to make this vision a reality. And we really need all of you coming together, bringing us your best ideas, really bringing all that grit, hard work, new ideas, bringing in other advocates that we can to the advocate program, and continuing to not only build the advocate program, but bring in other ideas as well around it if we're going to make a huge impact here. As Haider said, I recently joined the agency, sworn in October, so I've gotten to be here a few months so far. I couldn't imagine a better position to be in. It is really a dream come true to be able to lead ARPA-H. For any of you who've worked with an ARPA before, you'll know that there's nothing on earth like it. And I got to learn that both by serving as a ARPA, specifically DARPA program manager, then a deputy director there of the biotech office. And then going out into industry and realizing just how unique it was. Really, what defines an ARPA is its ability to basically act as a time machine. And that's really what we're doing here. You look out into the future and you can imagine what could be. And so right now we have this incredible progress in AI that is breathtaking. It is truly breathtaking. And I think many of us who've been through other huge technological shifts recognize that. And it's moving at a speed that we can barely keep track of and keep our arms around. And I think not only all of us understand its impact on what it could do for human health and medicine, healthcare delivery, et cetera, but also beyond that, the fact that it is very hard. This is one of the hardest spaces to go into with AI, given the very high regulatory burdens, given the fact that it needs to be done well, not put people at harm. And so it's a real challenge to understand. We can all imagine what it could be in the future, but how do we actually bring that future forward? And that is exactly what ARPA is here to do. We can take the risks that others can't take. And this is why I was so thrilled when I first met Haider and he came in and told me what he was doing. I said, wait, you're actually going to carve a path through FDA? That's incredible. I mean, what he has done in terms of bringing together all the stakeholders across HHS so that we are really one HHS on this is phenomenal, really being that crystallizing seed that he has worked so hard to create. And when he is able to do that, not only can we think big technologically, but then we can work with the regulatory system. We can think about reimbursement and march forward together. And that's something that no one private sector actor could have done. When we talk with VCs and entrepreneurs, they see a lot of effort here in AI and healthcare when it comes to things like revenue cycle management. And don't get me wrong, that is important. It takes costs out of the system, et cetera. But we understand that the real human impact is going to come when we can actually do much more complex care. When we make sure that, while you might live in one area of the country where you have an academic medical center and get the best care in the country, you don't have to go more than 2 or 3 hours away to have that care quality just drop off a cliff. And now we have this incredible tool that will enable us to bring this incredibly high quality care to anyone in the nation. And that in itself is incredibly valuable, not to mention all the lives that we will improve and save and the families that we will impact. Obviously, AI in healthcare is a huge priority for the agency. And we have programs like Haider's that are going straight at the clinical applications and how can we push those as hard as possible. We're also very, very interested in, obviously, drug development, drug discovery, repurposing of drugs for especially things like rare diseases. That's a big interest of ours, given that there are also market failures there. Everything we're going to be doing will have some component of AI in it, no matter what. We also care about, especially as we see other nations gain biotechnological capabilities, manufacturing, shorter clinical trial times, we're starting to see a risk for the biotech industry here in the United States. And that's quite distressing. We've seen that happen in other industries, in particular the semiconductor industry before, and we're now we're starting to see the hollowing out of our biotech industry here in the US. And so one of the things we're also looking very closely at is how do we win that biotech race so that the US is preeminent. And obviously getting AI into clinical care is part of that, but it also means shortening clinical trial times. It means being able to think about ways that we can even get rid of the phase 1 and think about other ways that we can do that phase 1 clinical trial, safety trials that we're doing, for example, through in silico methods, which I know many of you are like, oh, there's no way we're ever going to be able to do that. But if somebody doesn't actually put that marker out there, it's not going to happen. And so that's a lot of what we need to do is in the first place, just prove we can do it so that others can start to come in and we can spur industry to be able to come in behind us and build off of that. I want to tell you that one of the most important things all of you can do is also send us incredible program managers. For those of you who aren't familiar with the model of ARPA-H, PMs, program managers like Haider and others that you're going to meet as you continue to work with us, are really the lifeblood of the agency. They make everything happen. The PMs come with the idea. Sure, I can stand here and say, we're going to do something in AI in healthcare. That doesn't mean anything unless I don't have an incredible PM, somebody raising their hand who's been in industry, academia, startup land, maybe spent some time at a regulatory agency, come in and say, actually, I have a vision for how to make that come true. I have something that's been keeping me up at night. I think we can do it. The landscape has changed from a technological or scientific perspective, and the time is now. And so one of the biggest things we can also do to move this field forward is we need more than just Haider here building this field. And so if you know somebody who's incredibly talented, they can come for only 2 or 3 years. These are time-limited terms. We pay well. I just need to be able to tell that to you. We have special authorities. You get an incredible amount of both responsibility but autonomy. And even though I love this job, I will tell you the PM job is literally the most fun you will ever have in your life. And Haider and other people can tell you that, which is definitely true, because you just get to come in and work with the best minds in the world on the most important problems, and you don't have an investor breathing down your back saying, when am I going to make my 10x return off your company in the next 3 years? We care deeply about commercialization, but the nice thing is we don't have to make a return to our LPs. Our return is measured in lives saved, right? In years that we've saved of people having to suffer. There's no better return than you can deliver than that for all Americans. And so whether this is totally new to you or something you've thought about, I really encourage you to come talk to us about becoming a program manager. It really is just the best thing in the world to come and to do this. I wanted to definitely touch on here the fact that this really is about a partnership across HHS. We could not be doing this without our partners at the FDA and without our partners at CMMI. It's one thing to develop the tech, it's another thing to make sure it actually makes it into the hands of people and that companies can actually come in and develop the technology. And that's a really unique thing about our position within HHS and in the government is that we can bring those other players to the table so we can work together to deliver this future. I really need to just say thank you. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for saying you want to be part of this, you want to build this, you want to contribute to it. There are many, many ways to participate in this program. You can become a sub, you can become a partner. There are many ways you can partner with ARPA-H, whether it's through data or through just providing, cloud credits, whatever it might be. There's a million ways to collaborate with us and to be part of this team and to grow bigger. So thank you all for coming. We're very excited to have your ideas. Haider has set out an incredible vision, but we need your ideas on how to make that happen, and we need you to push the limits of what might be possible and bring the best people to the table. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of official programming. I want to actually thank everyone who gave the lightning talks for keeping us on time. Thank you for everyone who stuck around, both online and in person. I mean, this is such an exciting space, and to be able to do this with all of you is just like a dream come true. And to be able to do this with the full support of our partners across government, who are really mission driven. They really, if you've been a patient, if you've been a clinician, you know that we're losing this battle, and we need all the help we can get. So I really see this program as a pathway to be able to not just do this for patients that I see who have heart failure, but really for every patient in America, regardless of what condition they have.